Chapter 1095. Qin Guang decisively took Zhou Xian back to the hotel and continued to be a hands-off boss. He did not pay much attention to the box office. Now that the trend was set and could not be stopped, Qin Guang only needed to focus on dealing with the Oscar judges hiding in Eaton Manor. As for the photo catalyst, Zhou Xian actually knew more about it than he did and knew how to set up a laboratory. It was certainly not a simple matter. It involved purchasing equipment, buying land, building a house, hiring researchers, purchasing experimental materials, and so on. Every single one of them required a large amount of expenditure, time, energy, and manpower. But in other words, as long as there was money, it did not seem to be difficult. As long as there was money, there would always be brave people who could help you solve your problems. What Qin Guang could provide for Zhou Xian now was an almost unlimited supply of funds. It seemed that the pressure of $300 million was still too much, but it did not matter. It was not like he had to spend it all at once. There was still a long time, so he could take it slow. He could make some money from other places and burn it later. Speaking of which, if Sister Tang Ying wanted to form a medical research institute with Gokyo University and Moorlands Medical College, as the most important sample of the institute, it seemed that he should also be involved. Otherwise, wouldn't it be disgusting to let others play with the old man's genes all day long, and the old man did not even know what was going on? This thought came to Qin Guang's mind again. He had originally planned to leave Zhou Xian in the hotel, but he hadn't expected that she would not be idle for even a moment. Accompanied by Auntie Mei, Fong Tianyu and Tang Xiaokai's entourage, she had gone out to arrange for the molecular formula to be published in magazines and newspapers. In addition, she also needed to use this matter to send out the recruitment requirements. At this time, Zhou Xian was full of energy after receiving Qin Guang's knowledge. Especially after Prince returned from the negotiations, Zhou Xian had an inexplicable sense of historical mission in her heart. Although Qin Guang was amazing and unprecedented, his flaw was equally obvious, and that was laziness. Let him turn his knowledge of photocatalysis into a real product. He had too much power and no desire in his heart. Although he said that his goal was so noble that it could even make Zhou Xian's blood boil, looking at what this guy did all day, he just had to be addicted to acting in movies and countless other strange things, unable to extricate himself. This was a guy who didn't mean what he said. Therefore, this matter could only fall on his head. Zhou Xian felt that as someone close to Qin Guang, she was doing the photocatalyst thing. In a sense, she was the one who led Qin Guang into the field. Then she had the responsibility and obligation to squeeze the energy out of his brain and let him use his wisdom to make more contributions to this era. This was not the opposite of his original dream, and in a sense, it was the opposite of it. She would drag him forward in the field of photocatalysis, come up with more results that could change the world, and return the great rivers and mountains to a lush green. Let me be his shadow. I don't want any fame, and he is too much better than me. Instead of doing twice the work for half the result, it is better to let myself be his catalyst and let him play the greatest role. Only by doing this can I make my life more meaningful. As a person who from the beginning had made up her mind to dedicate her youth and the rest of her life to knowledge, this was probably the deepest obsession in Zhou Xian's heart. It was slightly childish, but it was very noble and great. Therefore, she decisively refused Qin Guang's request to roll in the sheets. With this guy's combat power, if she were to sleep with him, she would not be able to get out of bed in 2 or 3 days. If Qin Guang knew that he had accidentally cultivated another Frankenstein, he would probably find a brick and beat her to death. She didn't even have to wait until the next morning. That night, under the operation of Fong Tianyu and Lu Xiaoyang, and with the help of the people arranged by Tang Xiaokai, Zhou Xian directly published the molecular formula of the photocatalyst for organic macromolecular chains in the largest popular science magazine in the United States. The paper version and the electronic version were simultaneously published. This ultra-complex but stable molecular formula flew through the channels of the popular science magazine to various research institutes and universities in the United States. At the same time, it flew across the sea to the mailboxes of countless institutions of higher learning and scientific research institutions in China, Asia-Pacific, Europe, Oceania, and so on. At the same time, this article clearly expressed that the researcher who developed this molecular formula, Zhou Xian, had already received hundreds of millions of dollars in sponsorship. She was ready to establish her own scientific research institute. She was looking for talented scholars or young people to apply for her position. The competitive product was already in her hands. and she was just waiting for the grand plan to be realized. In addition, many of the world's leading equipment suppliers were also welcome to negotiate business. As long as your product is good enough, we don't lack money. Bravo and Woltzman, who were already extremely annoyed by this matter, almost jumped out of their beds when they saw this news. They originally thought that Qin Guang's threat to publish it in newspapers and magazines was just a negotiation tactic, and they didn't take it seriously. However, when they turned around, they saw this shocking news all over the world. This guy was for real. No wonder he left so quickly today. He didn't want to cooperate with Prince at all. The two crawled out of bed and rushed back to the laboratory office. On the way back, they called back the other senior leaders of the laboratory to urgently discuss countermeasures. Before, they had some doubts about the molecular formula that Qin Guang and Zhou Xian took out, and they were worried that the other party might have made up a big lie to fool them. Now their doubts were completely dispelled. Now that the other party dared to publicize it in public, it meant that they had absolute confidence in their results and dared to let the world examine and test them. In addition, they also knew that even if others obtained the molecular formula, it would be impossible for them to synthesize it. Therefore, when they announced the results, they also announced that they were going to set up their own laboratory. After all, this was a higher level of existence based on the existing theoretical system. If other scientific research institutions really reached an agreement with them first, then the advantages that Prince had accumulated in the field of photocatalysts over the past 10 or 20 years would disappear in an instant. In addition, considering the crazy box office of Women in North America, Bravo knew that Qin Guang was the main investor of this phenomenal movie. Therefore, the hundreds of millions of investment that they announced was already in place. Zhou Xian sat in the hotel room slightly tired. She looked at Qin Guang reproachfully. Why didn't you let me use your name? If you write me as the inventor, then wouldn't I really become a thief who deceived the world? Qin Guang smiled and hugged her in his arms. You can't say that. If I don't give it to you, then you take it away. Since I took the initiative to give it to you, you are as proficient in these 5 god-level formulas as I am. We are all family. How can it be called stealing? Zhou Xian shook her head fiercely. It's not the same. This is knowledge, not money. Qin Guang still insisted. It's the same. Forget it, I won't explain it to you. In short, you just need to know that I made this arrangement because I had my own deeper considerations. This is the most beneficial and helpful to me. Zhou Xian looked at him in confusion. Why? Qin Guang chuckled as he continued. Think about it. In the eyes of others, I'm already capable of so many things. Now, I'm even able to push forward the development of photocatalysis technology by 50 years. That's simply not giving others a way out. What if the perverted people really go crazy and get the Four Corners Continent Special Forces to kidnap me? So now I have to push some of the benefits out, especially this kind of scientific research that involves a market of hundreds of billions of dollars. You can't take it alone. You have to quickly pull together a team to cover for yourself. Although we own the intellectual property, you have to share the credit for the research and development. There's an old saying in Wuxia, the tallest tree in the forest is the first to be destroyed by the wind. Zhou Xian glared at him. You have the cheek to say that. You're just afraid that people don't know what you're capable of. You want to win an Oscar just by making a random movie. Qin Guang sighed. We can't help ourselves in this world. Alright, the night is long and I'm not in the mood to sleep. Why don't we? Zhou Xian got up and ran. Don't even think about it. I still have things to do tomorrow. I've already asked for the room next door. Don't knock on the door. Saying that, she ran away with a smirk. Although she looked like she was joking, she really did not intend to stay overnight. Qin Guang watched her close the door and run away. He also knew that her worry was reasonable. He sighed and felt that he should buy super strong silicone or something. However, he looked down at his crotch again and thought to himself, with my combat power, the silicone produced by current human technology can't satisfy my combat power, right? Forget it. When I pay off the mortgage, I'll let Nicosia use the laboratory to develop a new super silicone. Super durable. It was the 7th day of the release of Women, and it was still dominating the charts. The 7th day of the North American box office was released at 1 a.m. that night. It rose against the trend and returned to $40 million, continuing to lead the pack. The next morning, Qin Guang got up early. He also received a piece of good news. He was worried that the Oscar judges in Eaton Manor would shamelessly run away overnight. In the end, he found out that none of them had left. He heard that they had quietly sneaked to the airport yesterday. However, after the news of him causing a scene in the Princeton District Court, some news related to them was interspersed. This group of unconscionable filmmakers did not have a good time. They could not afford to lose face like this. Chapter 1096. Qin Guang thought to himself, I'm going to leave Prince's people hanging today anyway. Should I go back to Eaton Manor and talk to Oscar's old fogies? But after thinking about it, he changed his mind. I can't go straight to their door. The first time he went, the group of people fled and hid in the fallout shelter in a panic, which was really distressing. Although another day had passed, if he went back immediately, they would probably have the same reaction. Now they could continue to stay in Eaton Manor because of their pride, but if he rashly went to visit again, it was hard to guarantee that they would not completely throw away their pride and run away. What can I do? After thinking for a long time, Qin Guang found a baseball cap, put on a pair of sunglasses, wrapped himself up tightly and sneaked out of the hotel. He did not drive the Lincoln that had already been recognized. Instead, he took a taxi and went straight to Eaton Manor. Blatantly visiting them was no longer possible. He had to take a roundabout way to save the country. Qin Guang planned to first disguise himself and find out the situation. Halfway there, Zhou Xian called and said that Princess Dr. Bravo had called to see him. Qin Guang simply replied with 2 words, I won't see him. But, you really won't see him? Qin Guang snorted. Leave them hanging for now. When the others arrive, we'll talk to the others first, then talk to them. Don't show any signs of impatience. They're the ones who are anxious now. All right, we'll do as you say. I won't care about them for now. I'm hanging up. Someone's coming for an interview. That's fast. Bring Auntie May when you interview people. You can't be careless. Okay, I know. Don't worry. Qin Guang hung up the phone with Zhou Xian and leaned his head against the back seat of the car. His thoughts returned to the Oscar matter. Although the photo catalyst matter was important, it was ultimately just an interlude for him. It was a seemingly important but unimportant detail. Although he had been trying to come up with a solution, he still could not come up with anything reliable until he got off the car at the gates of Eaton Manor. His original plan was to swagger in through the main entrance. But after taking 2 steps, he realized that he had forgotten to bring his invitation and membership card. In addition, last time he only showed his face for a short while when he entered the gate. When he entered, the elders of the Academy Award Committee hid like mice hiding from a cat. Qin Guang did not believe that the security guards at the gate did not inform them. So he walked a few hundred meters around the outer wall of Eaton Manor, then flipped over the wall in a flash. Although the wall was high and there were caltrops on it, it could not stop Qin Guang. He easily lifted his leg and flipped over the wall. After entering the manor, Qin Guang adjusted the sunglasses on his face and loosened the scarf around his neck. Coupled with the Armani haute couture winter coat that he got from Liu Xiaoyang in Los Angeles, he did not look sneaky at all despite wearing a cap and a pair of sunglasses. Instead, he looked very dignified. Qin Guang did not care much about what he wore, but since he came to America for the Oscars this time, he had to at least keep up with his appearance when he was out or dealing with people, regardless of whether he was a loser or a rich and handsome guy. Besides, Qin Guang himself had unknowingly entered into acting mode. Of course, he had to look like an upper-class person if he wanted to disguise himself in Eaton Manor. Walking on the road, Qin Guang, who was relatively tall and slender, did not deliberately keep a low profile. From time to time, he attracted the curious glances of blonde and blue-eyed international socialites around him. Some of the bolder ones even took the initiative to strike up a conversation. Those who knew their stuff could tell that the total value of his outfit was at least tens of thousands of US dollars. He was simply a walking US dollar bill. There were only 2 kinds of people who wore US dollar bills on the streets: scammers or rich men. The latter was more likely. International socialites were also interested in rich men. Although they could not see his face, Qin Guang's figure was impeccable. Qin Guang was harassed to the point of suffering. Why am I not usually so popular? Today I wanted to hide my identity and sneak around, but all of you came at me. What if someone recognized me and posted it on social media? The old man would have to run away without turning his head. After all, you are young ladies who have seen the world in this rich land. You should be more reserved. Qin Guang fled with great difficulty. He could not even get close to the castle villa. He finally hid in a coffee shop in the corner of Eaton Manor. He found a remote booth and sat down alone. Only then did he temporarily settle down. In the past, People said that the enthusiastic crowd in Yanjing Chaoyang district was the most powerful anti-spy method. Qin Guang did not believe it, but now he believed it. The Americans weren't any better either. He turned his head and looked out through the glass window. 300 or 400 meters away was the European-style castle villa. He wanted to go in and find out the situation. Although it was only a window away, it was like an eternal farewell. Forget it, I'm really afraid of this group of judges who are just trying to scare themselves. I reckon that teacher's matter will take a few more days in Princeton. Although I don't seem to be of much use, I still have to go back and sign the contract with Prince. I can't run around with him. Qin Guang decided to stay here and try his luck. He wanted to see if he could bump into one or two senior people who had a say in the Oscar committee. He casually ordered a cup of coffee and occupied a booth. He was bored to death as he drank his coffee. He took out his phone and looked around at the crowd in the coffee shop from time to time. After carefully looking around, he found something strange. In this coffee shop that was less than 200 square meters, there were 5 or 6 groups of people sitting in 2s and 3s. But among these 5 or 6 groups of people, there was no ordinary person. They were all famous people in various European and American circles. For example, the group of strong men sitting near the entrance were the popular stars of several North American ice hockey teams. They were big shots in the NHL. Sitting in the corner on the right were a few fashionable girls. Qin Guang barely recognized them, but his ears were sharp and he heard the name of one of the girls. He looked it up on his phone and found out that it was a popular female star who had recently become popular in an HBO TV series. When he clicked into the girl's encyclopedia, the people who were sitting at the same table as her were linked in 2s and 3s. The legendary North American young female star group. Well, although there was a big gap between the North American TV and film circles, this could be considered a little bit related to the film circle. The other groups of people sitting there were also similar. Out of curiosity, Qin Guang went to look up the name of the coffee shop in the Eaton Manor. He was shocked when he found out. This inconspicuous Brosnan coffee shop was famous in North America. Many celebrities from all walks of life liked to meet here. It was similar to the Yi-Nua Club in Yanjing, but it was not as close to the public. On second thought, there was a very strict membership invitation system to enter the gate of the Eaton Manor. Although the inside of the manor was not closed, it was strictly guarded from the outside. These people who would cause screaming along the way naturally enjoyed this seemingly open and free environment, but in fact it was private and safe. In addition, the taste of the Nanshan coffee brewed in this shop was indeed very good, and the atmosphere was very good. The boss behind the shop, Brosnan, was also a world-renowned veteran jazz master. From time to time he would personally come to the shop to play a few songs, which further enhanced the style of the shop. Qin Guang waited for a while and another group of people came in. He did not need to Google to recognize one of them. Just from the way he walked and his height he could recognize him even through sunglasses. He was a big shot in the European and American music circles, the Mars Bro. In a sense he was also a big shot, but unfortunately he was not related to the film industry. Qin Guang sighed again and did not strike up a conversation with anyone. No one paid any attention to him either. He sat for about an hour. His phone was almost out of battery and he had drunk 3 cups of coffee. He was about to get up and ask the waiter for a charger when he heard the bell at the door ring again. A tall, strong white old man with a face full of white stubble appeared at the door. The customers in the coffee shop got up excitedly and nodded to him. Qin Guang recognized the man and was a little surprised. He did not expect to meet the owner of the coffee shop, Mr. Brosnan, by chance today. He also waved at Brosnan like the others, but in the dimly lit shop he still wore sunglasses, which made him look a little weird. Brosnan also waved at him and went directly backstage. Qin Guang's action attracted the attention of others. Some people turned the topic to him and whispered incessantly. Qin Guang's ears were very sharp, so he heard every word clearly. He forcibly translated it into down-to-earth Chinese, and this was the general meaning. Why is he pretending to be a wolf with a pig nose? None of us are wearing sunglasses and Mars Bro has taken them off. This guy still thinks he's a celebrity and is afraid of being recognized. Maybe he's a prince from the Middle East. Prince from the Middle East? Didn't you see his black hair? He must be Asian. How funny. No wonder these people thought Qin Guang looked funny. Everyone sitting here was famous, but he was the only one who wore sunglasses and refused to take them off. If he was not afraid of exposing his identity, Qin Guang really wanted to slap these people's tables. What do you know? At least I'm more famous than you in America now. However, he endured it in the end and waited for a while. It seemed that after Brosnan arrived, more and more people came in one after another and went straight to the booths. It seemed that today was Brosnan's fixed performance day. Chapter 1097. On the other hand, Qin Guang saw quite a few familiar faces, such as Irma Watson, whom he had caught a glimpse of at the premiere of His Woman. He knew this girl. Her name was similar to Emma Watson, who acted in Harry Potter, but she was not as famous. She seemed to be someone in the film industry, but the strange thing was that although she was not very famous among ordinary people, her status in the film industry was not low. She had appeared at the premiere of Sunshine, as a guest of William Jones. She did not seem very active at the premiere from beginning to end. Whether it was when William Jones and the others laughed at Qin Guang, or when the superstars of the fighting world appeared, she was very calm. But the strange thing was, no matter how crazy and excited the others were, she always stood in the middle of the crowd. But at that time, Qin Guang did not care about her at all. He did not care about everyone around William Jones and Ben Affleck. But today, Qin Guang deliberately heard her name clearly and searched for her information on Google with the little battery left on his phone. She was 25 years old this year and had just graduated from Yale last year. She majored in law but chose to become an actress. So far, she had acted in a few lesser-known literary films, none of which were big hits, and she had only played insignificant supporting roles. Everything else about her was a blank slate. After she entered the cafe, she sat with the actresses from the previous TV series and whispered to each other happily. More and more people came, so much so that almost every booth was full. Finally, a group of uninvited guests came to the table that Qin Guang occupied alone. They were a few young people and they seemed to be a band that had recently become popular. "Hey bro, are you sitting here alone? Can we sit down at this table?" one of the young men with blonde hair asked. Then, without waiting for Qin Guang to answer, he sat straight down. The others followed closely. In just a moment, the small booth was filled with 6 people, Qin Guang and the 5-member band. Qin Guang did not take off his sunglasses, nor did he pay attention to them. He continued to fiddle with his phone. Foreigners were like this, especially this group of obviously explosive rock singers. At first glance, one could not expect much from them. They pretended to be friendly and easy to get along with, but in fact their behavior was simply rude. But now that all the booths were full, it seemed very rude for Qin Guang to take a seat alone. Those people did not ask for coffee like Qin Guang. Instead, they raised their hands to ask the waiter to order a Bloody Mary cocktail, as if they were afraid that others would not know they were Maverick. "Bro, why don't you take off your sunglasses? No one here will scream for your autograph just because you're a celebrity. Look, everyone here is a celebrity." While waiting for the waiter to bring the drinks, the blonde man with the bird's nest hair pretended to greet Qin Guang while suddenly reaching his hand for Qin Guang's sunglasses. He was really friendly. Qin Guang pinched his hand and exerted a little more strength, causing the white youth's face to instantly turn pale. Then Qin Guang threw his hand back. "Watch your hand. I'm not your bro." The other punk youths were about to flip out when the young man with the bird's nest hair, whose palm was still bruised, quickly restrained his friend. The young man with the bird's nest hair quietly rubbed his palm under the table and forced a smile. He said, "Sorry, I didn't know you were so sensitive. I know that many people have some weird habits. I completely understand that. We are the same. We are also crazy at concerts. I just don't think your behavior is very polite." He was a little afraid of Qin Guang. He felt that if Qin Guang had exerted a little more strength, the bones in his palm might have been crushed. Although the hockey stars over there were his friends and they were also very good at playing, he knew that Brosnan would never allow anyone to cause trouble in his coffee shop. He did not want to be chased away. At the very least, he could not let people think that he and his friends were the ones who were stirring up trouble. Qin Guang raised his head slightly and adjusted his sunglasses, hiding his face even deeper. "So you sat at my table without my permission. Is that very polite?" Before they could speak, Qin Guang waved his hand again. "Forget it. Don't talk to me. I don't want to know you and I'm not interested in sharing my weird habits with you." Qin Guang was in a bad mood at the moment because he realized that even on such an occasion, even though the place was already full of celebrities, the only person in the coffee shop who had the deepest relationship with the film industry was Irma. What was even more tragic was that he heard such a conversation in the crowd. By the way, aren't Mr. Hernandez and the others coming? Don't mention it. I called them before I came over and they said they were in a meeting. What meeting? Considering whether to give the Oscar a Young Achievement Award to get rid of that Wuxia guy. Qin Guang was speechless. Who the hell wants a Young Achievement Award? I want the Best Actor Award. Best Actor Award. I can't get this kind of award that's used to get rid of beggars, okay? He was speechless. The Oscar Best Actor Award could not be delayed. If he couldn't get it this year and had to wait until next year, then there was no need to struggle anymore. He could just go straight to Babaishan and find himself a good feng shui land that could emit smoke from his grave. Shameful cowards. I'm just letting you watch my movie. I'm not going to dig out your eyes. Do you have to be like this? The bastards hiding in the castle were even more cowardly than he thought. Qin Guang felt that his plan to meet them by chance was going to be completely ruined. Did he really have to force himself to barge in, tie everyone up, put a knife on their necks and force them to watch women? I'm a good person. Why are you forcing me to be a prostitute? After waiting for a few more minutes, the cafe was completely full. Even some of the corners were filled with people. The young man with the bird's nest haircut was a chatterbox after all. He approached Qin Guang again. Friend, say something? I admit that you're very mysterious and you've piqued my interest. But I think we should have a common interest. At least you should be like all of us and you should be here for Mr. Brosnan's jazz music, right? People who like music should have some common interest, right? Qin Guang turned to look at him. Shut up. No one will think you're mute if you don't speak. The young man next to him finally couldn't take it anymore. Do you know who we are? I've never seen a person as arrogant as you. The corner of Qin Guang's mouth slightly curved behind his sunglasses. Whether I'm arrogant or not has nothing to do with you. I don't even want to know who you are. You've been harassing me since you sat here. I'm telling you clearly that I'm not interested in jazz. Can you shut up now? The young man wanted to say something, but Qin Guang picked up the steel wine glass in front of them with 2 fingers and gently exerted force. There was his daily act of crushing things. It worked. Under the dumbfounded eyes of these guys, Qin Guang used only 2 fingers to crush the steel glass, which was more than 3 millimeters thick, into a flat iron plate. You'll pay for this glass. I'm warning you for the last time. If you bother me again, I'll crush your guitar hands next time. This time they were all well behaved. Although their eyes were full of indignation and unwillingness, Qin Guang finally had some peace. Burshman. Violent man. Since you don't like jazz, why did you come here early to occupy the precious booth? Don't you know that today is Mr. Brosnan's annual theme performance day? Do you know how many people are stopped from coming in? Qin Guang could imagine how these guys would complain about him in their hearts, but he didn't care at all. He was ready to leave after finishing the top-quality nanshan in front of him. The old man had no interest in jazz at all. The old man's piano idol had reached its peak. Now he just wanted to get an Oscar. I'm trying to save my own life. Who has time to play with you guys? Just as he was about to get up and leave, Brosnan finally changed his clothes and came out from the backstage of the coffee shop. Standing on the stage, which was less than 10 square meters in size, he suddenly raised his hand and lifted the curtain covering the stage. A bright white piano appeared on the stage, and the audience suddenly burst into thunderous applause. Brosnan turned to the audience and made a standard aristocratic salute. Then he got up and said, "Thank you for coming to Brosnan's coffee shop. Today is the annual theme performance day. As you can see, this piano is a treasure that I just borrowed from my friend last week. Its name is Mississippi Pearl. It was created by Ace Fernandez and is as famous as Nightingale. So today's theme is indeed related to the piano. It's called 1900. As soon as he finished speaking, there was another thunderous applause in the coffee shop. Pianist on the Sea was an epoch-making movie, and it was much more famous in Europe and the United States than in China. The fictional character 1900 even, in a sense, conformed to the perfect image in the minds of many European and American literary fans. He was born on the sea, lived for the piano and died with the sound of the piano in the storm. He didn't have his own name, nor did he have any music that was passed down to the world. But what he represented was the purest pursuit of art. Many people didn't expect that Brosnan's theme today would be to use the piano Mississippi Pearl to interpret the story of 1900. Qin Guang, who had just raised his but slightly, sat down again. He couldn't deny that even though he knew it was a waste of time, he was still attracted by Brosnan's theme. There was no other reason. His strongest piano craftsmanship had been perfected by playing the role of 1900 on the virtual Virginian in the World of Cups. He didn't know why, but he couldn't control his strong impulse to act cool. Damn it, the most authentic 1900 in history is here. How dare you hold a theme concert of 1900 in front of me? Do I give you face? Brosnan didn't know that he had provoked the wrong person. He still said enthusiastically, as we all know, the contest between 1900 and the jazz master in the Hall of the Virginian is a very important scene in the whole movie. Today I will perform all the songs involved in this contest for you. After that he said naughtily, of course I know that many of you here can play the piano. So, every time I play a song I will invite a friend to come on the stage just like the contest between 1900 and the jazz master. What do you think? Naturally there was another burst of cheers in the coffee shop. Whether it was playing with Brosnan or touching the Mississippi Pearl, it was a rare honor for a musician. Only Qin Guang looked at the old man through a pair of sunglasses. You're finished, you're really finished. Chapter 1098. Brosnan looked like a master, but he actually enjoyed the feeling of being worshipped. Otherwise, why would he still go to his own coffee shop to play from time to time at the age of 60? Brosnan raised his hands slightly and gestured for the audience to be quiet. Immediately the crowd in the coffee shop quickly settled down and became silent. Then he gently pulled out a round stool and sat in front of the white piano. A solemn atmosphere arose spontaneously in the cafe. After a brief silence, Brosnan's old but slender and flexible fingers fell on the keys. The melodious and rhythmic sound of the piano resounded in the coffee shop in an instant. Everyone sitting in the coffee shop pricked up their ears and listened attentively. As Brosnan said, he was playing a classic piece from The Pianist on the Sea, which was played by Jerry, the founder of jazz in the movie. In addition, he had added some of his own adaptations which made the whole piece more layered. Beautiful notes jumped out of his fingertips like a waterfall, like lively and lovely elves, circling every corner of the coffee shop and cheering. His music was extremely smooth, just like silk that had just been woven. It fell straight down like mercury hit the ground and then bounced up again, adding a bit of liveliness. Brosnan's adaptations on the basis of traditional blues made his piano sound even more beautiful than the original sound in the movie. His artistic achievement in arranging music was comparable to that of Ennio Morricone, the film arranger of The Pianist on the Sea, and his achievement in performance was comparable to that of Gita Butta, the performer of the film's original soundtrack. At this time, Brosnan, a real master of arranging and performing, played a piece in the cafe that surpassed the original soundtrack in terms of artistic achievement. Although Jerry in 1900 portrayed in the movie, could be regarded as the most perfect piano artists of that era, the music of the movie itself was still just an ordinary modern score which was not so perfect. Ennio and Gita might be world-renowned, but they were not undeservedly unsurpassed. It might be more difficult to judge the quality of music than to select an Oscar winner. In a certain sense, perhaps only Qin Guang himself knew what a perfect piece of music that was made up in movies was like. It didn't exist, but it was something that everyone in the world was in awe of. Just like now, when everyone else was intoxicated by it, he was the only one who was unmoved. He even felt disgusted by Brosnan's adaptation. The effect of Jerry's performance, which he had encountered in The World in the Cup, was indeed somewhat different from that of the Italian national treasure, Gita. However, it was completely different from Brosnan's seemingly exquisite but actually stupid and clumsy adaptation. Instead, it was truly beyond the limits of human beings and only belonged to God. Perhaps it was because Qin Guang had seen what true perfection looked like, so his expectations of Brosnan were too high. At the very least, it sounded like Brosnan had done a great job in the ears of others. Finally, when Brosnan finished his performance, the cafe burst into thunderous applause after a brief silence. The old man stood up from his stool, bowed to the audience below the stage and said, "The score is on the Apple computer in front of the piano. Are any of you interested in coming up and playing? Of course, it doesn't matter if you know the original version of the movie, but you can't play Come Back, Dad. I dare not compare myself to Mr. Jerry Morton, and you can't compare yourselves to 1900, right? We're just playing a simple theme." As soon as Brosnan's voice fell, many people in the cafe were eager to have a try. Professional pianists wanted to try Brosnan's adapted blues with Mississippi Pearls, And there were also people who had deliberately practiced movie soundtracks before who wanted to show off in front of everyone. But even so, no one stood up and went straight to the stage. This seemed to be a very casual private occasion, but because there were too many celebrities here, the value of this performance was raised a lot out of thin air. Of course it was great to play well, but if you messed up it would be a great shame. The keyboardist of the 5-member band sitting at the same table as Qin Guang was also one of the people who was tempted. He said to the young man with bird's nest hair next to him, "Although I'm not very skilled, I really want to give it a try." "Then be brave and go up there. There are many seniors here. I'll see the situation first. If no one goes up in 30 seconds I'll give it a try." Brosnan seemed to have guessed this scene and he was a little disappointed. He said, "Actually, my friend Malfoy Bentler was also going to come today. I was going to invite him to play this song directly." As soon as Brosnan's voice fell, people in the cafe began to whisper. Malfoy Bentler was also a celebrity among celebrities in Europe and the United States. In the past 10 or 20 years he had produced soundtracks for more than 100 movies, and his artistic achievements were not inferior to Ennio Morricone's. In addition to being a musician, Mr. Bentler was also a standing member of the Academy Award Committee, and his opinion on the selection of the Academy Award for Best Music was very important. At this moment he was in an old castle villa less than half a kilometer away from the cafe. "Mr. Brosnan, then why didn't Mr. Bentler come?" someone in the crowd asked loudly. Qin Guang rolled his eyes silently. He had a hunch that he was going to be attacked every day. "Sure enough," Brosnan sighed. "Because of some special reasons that everyone knows, Malfoy temporarily changed his itinerary. At least he probably won't come out of the villa before the Wuxia man leaves Princeton." The crowd in the cafe suddenly became excited. "Damn the Wuxia man. We can't let him behave atrociously on American soil. Although his movie is really good, he can't treat Mr. Zhou Xian like this. He's humiliating us. We should unite and ask the diplomats to put him on the list of unwelcome people and expel him from the country. Before he is expelled we should teach him a lesson. He's too arrogant." The young man sitting in front of Qin Guang also shouted loudly, "That Wuxia man better not appear in front of me, or I'll beat the *t out of him." Looking at Su Tao, Qin Guang pondered in his heart, "Honestly speaking, I can beat 100 of you without batting an eye with your appearance." The noise in the cafe lasted for a few minutes before it calmed down. Although not everyone hated the Wuxia man Qin Guang, it was obvious that everyone agreed with Brosnan on his territory. Qin Guang glanced around and saw that only Alma Watson and a few other people did not join in the uproar. "Sigh, detestable Donald, you've had your fun running around naked, but I've become *King scapegoat. I've almost become a street rat." Brosnan called out again, Okay, everyone quiet down. Don't talk about unhappy things. Although it's a pity that I can't perform with Malfoy on the same stage, it's an honor for me to be able to perfect the song in Pianist on the Sea. In fact, I didn't adapt this song alone, but Malfoy and I did it together. Everyone thank him." After insulting the Wuxia man Qin Guang, Brosnan decisively turned everyone's attention back to him. After all, his main purpose today was to show off and enjoy the joy of success. "Thank you, Mr. Brosnan and Mr. Bentler, for your contributions. You two are indeed one of the most outstanding music artists in the world today." The people in the cafe did not disappoint him, and all kinds of mushy flattery rose to the sky. Only Qin Guang, who was hiding behind his sunglasses, curled up the corners of his mouth slightly and sneered disdainfully. "You're a frog at the bottom of a well. You're not perfect at all. You're just wasting it." Bang. "Sunglasses man, what do you mean? What was that expression on your face just now? Are you looking down on Mr. Brosnan?" The keyboardist, who was sitting opposite Qin Guang, turned around and saw the cold smile on Qin Guang's face, which was out of place with everyone else. He was instantly enraged. From the beginning they didn't like Qin Guang, but they had been holding back their temper. Now not only did Qin Guang not give them face, but he even looked down on Brosnan in public. This young man couldn't stand it. "You can scold me, but you can't insult my idol." The keyboardist's voice was so loud that countless eyes in the cafe focused on him and Qin Guang. Originally, as the only man in sunglasses in the cafe, Qin Guang had been a maverick because he loved sunglasses more than Brother Mars. Now he had become the target of public criticism. The keyboardist looked at Qin Guang angrily, feeling both angry and proud. "Annoying mysterious boy, aren't you very arrogant? Keep being arrogant. Let's see how you can be arrogant now. Don't think that I don't know what you're thinking. You don't understand music at all. That's why you're smiling like that. You were looking down on people just now. The other 4 people at the same table as Qin Guang also looked at Qin Guang with great interest and didn't say a word. They wouldn't help Qin Guang explain. Their purpose was to see Qin Guang embarrass himself. They didn't believe that this guy would dare to be arrogant in front of so many people on such an occasion. Qin Guang looked around silently and saw that everyone was looking at him with unkind eyes. He then turned his head to the keyboardist in front of him and saw a little pride in the guy's angry eyes. Qin Guang thought to himself, this bastard must think that I'm pretending to be a grandson and that he can finally embarrass me. But I'm sorry, I'm worried that I don't have a title, so it's not convenient for me to go on stage and slap people in the face. You're giving me a pillow when I want to doze off. Thank you so much. Qin Guang stood up slowly. You're right, young man. I really don't like the arrogant words of this Brosnan. *T. Beat him up. *T. B***. As soon as Qin Guang said that, the crowd exploded. A few hot-tempered people jumped up and were about to rush forward. On the other hand, the 5-member band at the same table as Qin Guang was very restrained. They were stunned. They had thought that the man in sunglasses was just eccentric, but now they knew that he was a psychopath. He didn't know fear at all and didn't know the basic respect for others. At that moment, Qin Guang pulled out the chair behind him and walked forward. As he walked, he deliberately straightened his hands and groped in front of him, then pretended to trip over a leg of a table and almost fell to the ground. The angry crowd quickly calmed down. Oh, so he's blind. Poor guy, no wonder he refused to take off his sunglasses. The lead singer of the 5-member band, the young man with the bird's nest haircut, was very puzzled. Didn't he have good eyes and quick reflexes when I tried to grab his sunglasses? How could he be blind? No, could it be that he used his ears to judge my hand movements? Is he the blind man in Chinese movies? While the young man with the bird's nest haircut was puzzled, Qin Guang had already approached the stage. Then he pulled over the stool in front of the Pearl of the Mississippi and sat down. He turned his head back and smiled under his sunglasses, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. Mr. Brosnan just said that anyone who is interested can come up and play the same song as him. I didn't intend to go up on stage, but I think your blind worship is too stupid and ridiculous. Now I'll tell you why I think Brosnan is talking nonsense. I'll tell you what the real blues is. After Qin Guang finished speaking, he ignored all the voices in the noisy cafe. Under Brosnan's angry and confused gaze, he turned around and touched the keys with lightning speed. Lowly mortals, you will never understand that the perfection you see will always be the perfection of mortals. Real perfection only exists in the old man's world of cups, which is perfection created by the power of the real God. Listen up, all of you. Chapter 1099. If Brosnan's music was like flowing mercury, then Qin Guang's music was like a natural spring rain. If Brosnan's music was like dancing elves, then Qin Guang's music was like an angel flying out of the gate of heaven. Brosnan's blues was a beautiful painting for the audience in the cafe, but what Qin Guang played, which was composed by the heavenly Holy Grail and performed by the NPCs in the world in the cup, opened a holy door to perfection for the audience. To humans, there would never be a truly perfect music because humans were always striving for something better. In the human mind, perfection was something that everyone wanted to achieve, but it was impossible for them to achieve it. However, for Qin Guang and the heavenly Holy Grail, what he played might not be perfect in the endless realm of the gods, but from the perspective and level of humans, there was really nothing to nitpick about. The incomparably beautiful music shot out of Qin Guang's fingertips and lingered in the cafe. There was a saying that lingered for 3 days without ending. Although it was an imaginary saying, it actually referred to the fact that the music was so beautiful that people could not help but repeat it repeatedly in their minds. At this moment, the music that Qin Guang played had such an effect. It penetrated the eardrums and struck people's hearts, leaving a mark in the depths of their souls. Of course, although the music created by the heavenly Holy Grail was perfect, only Qin Guang was able to perform it. No matter how great a master he was, no matter how much he practiced during the performance, it would be impossible for him to be as perfect as Qin Guang. Even if there was a difference of less than 0.001 second in any of the seemingly minor notes, it would become a flaw in the entire performance process, and it would be infinitely magnified in the ears of those who understood music, thus affecting the performance of the entire piece. Just like Da Vinci's paintings, every masterpiece contained the inevitability of Da Vinci's artistic achievements, as well as the serendipity of his creative inspiration. Da Vinci had perfectly combined the two elements of inevitability and serendipity, resulting in an artistic chemical reaction that changed quantity to quality. Only then did he become a true masterpiece. On such a piece of work, even the slightest mistake that seemed insignificant, or even the size of a strand of hair, would become an unforgettable flaw. Asking others to perform Qin Guang's piece would always depend on the actual performance effects brought about by individual differences. Everyone's talent was different. The length of the fingers, dexterity, and the speed at which the brain analyzed the music score would all be different. Therefore, the rhythm in which they hit the keys would also be different. Even the personality of the pianist would affect the music they played. This was also the reason why many piano artists would have different styles when they played the same piece. However, performing the piece of the Heavenly Holy Grail did not require any personal style, only a complete and accurate reproduction of the original sound. Because the piece itself was too perfect, any individual's performance would be superfluous. As long as the piece was restored to its original state, it would be the highest artistic achievement. In the whole world, Qin Guang was the only one who could reproduce the original sound. In terms of musical creativity, Qin Guang was almost a zero, but in terms of piano performance as a humanoid jukebox, no one would dare to say that they were the best in history. What artistic talent! What's the use of that? What I pursue is accuracy. In a blur, the expressions of the people in the cafe changed from anger and confusion to unknowingly intoxicated. The same was true for Brosnan, who was standing behind Qin Guang. Although he had said that anyone could go on stage and perform, he had already chosen someone in his heart. It was just that Qin Guang pretended to be blind and went on stage directly, catching him off guard. By the time he wanted to stop him, Qin Guang had already sat on the stool and started playing. Brosnan was very calm at first, but when he heard that Qin Guang's performance was different from his own and the film's original sound, he felt very disdainful at first, thinking that this blind man was too confident. Do you think anyone is qualified to adapt Ano's work? Do you know what you're doing? But before he could finish mocking Qin Guang in his heart, when Qin Guang's second note came out, he was instantly stunned, and then an unimaginable thought came to his mind. What's going on? It seems like his adaptation is better than mine and Malfoy's? How is that possible? This is music, this is art. How can I have such a feeling after listening to it for only a few seconds? An artistic achievement is not a 100-meter race. How can it be so easy to judge whether it's good or bad? I must have been hallucinating just now. Once again, Brosnan focused his mind and worked even harder to comprehend the movement that Qin Guang had performed. His own artistic achievement could be considered the highest in the cafe at that time. When he was fully immersed in it, he was completely intoxicated in it in an instant, standing still like a wax figure in Madame Tussauds wax museum. In a trance, he felt that he was vaguely wandering in the sea of music, unable to extricate himself. Each note played by Qin Guang was like a stunning brush stroke on a canvas, forming a picture in front of Brosnan, pulling him into it. These notes were like bricks, building one beautiful building after another around him, making him feel like he was in a quiet castle, and then he felt like he was in a Munich factory with roaring machines, and then he felt like he was standing in front of the Louvre and looking up. Vaguely, the picture changed again and Brosnan's memory was pulled back to his childhood. Looking around, the eyes of the 61-year-old Brosnan were filled with the back of his 16-year-old self. He seemed to have returned to the campus full of fragrant camphor trees, walking side by side with Velina on a path sprinkled with dried yellow leaves. With every step he took, he could hear the rustling sound of the fallen leaves being stepped on. Velina was also using her Oriole-like voice to sketch out a beautiful future for the two of them. The soothing and melodious blues completely dragged the old man named Brosnan into a whirlpool of memories, sinking deeper and deeper until even his soul was about to be swallowed. When the music gradually stopped, Brosnan came back to himself after a long time. When he touched his face, he found that it was wet with tears. Velina had been dead for almost 10 years, and the lilacs in front of her grave had been replaced 20 times. He looked around again and saw that the hundreds of people in the large cafe were also in the same situation. Everyone's face was covered with tears. Even the strong men who played ice hockey also had tears in their eyes. Qin Guang, who was disguised as a blind man, stood up. A middle-aged black man next to him hurriedly stood up and pushed his chair to Qin Guang. "Sir, please sit down." Qin Guang did not stand on ceremony with him. He sat down calmly. If he had only shown an ordinary level of strength, Brosnan's fans in the cafe would not have been so impressed by him and respected him so much. However, what Qin Guang had brought out was a perfect adaptation from The World in Cups, which was the most perfect tune in the truest sense. Although piano performance in the general sense could not be judged easily, the level that Qin Guang had shown was so high that it would become an eternal classic that would transcend time. The strength that he displayed was so overwhelming that many people present, like Brosnan, quickly had the thought that his adaptation was better than the others. However, others did not know that this was the result of the heavenly Holy Grail. They just thought that it was Qin Guang's adaptation and creation. People's admiration for him instantly rose to another level and realm. People slowly turned their eyes to Brosnan and could not help but sympathize with this famous jazz master. This was supposed to be his stage. How could such a blind master appear out of nowhere? The 5-member punk band that had forced Qin Guang onto the stage was now extremely embarrassed. If this blind master had only walked onto the stage by himself, Mr. Brosnan would not have been too embarrassed. However, it was precisely because of the provocation of these people that Mr. Brosnan had said in public that he thought Mr. Brosnan was just talking nonsense. Previously, they had thought that Mr. Brosnan was ignorant, but now they knew that Mr. Brosnan was the real deal. What he had said was right. This was King embarrassing. Wasn't this putting Mr. Brosnan on a fire? Mr. Brosnan seemed to be kind, but he was actually arrogant, which was known to almost everyone in the European and American music circles. What would he do now? After this matter is over, will he bear a grudge against us for making things difficult for him? Finally, under the gaze of the crowd, Brosnan lit a cigar and took a deep puff. He then turned to Qin Guang and suddenly bowed. "Thank you, sir, for letting me hear such a wonderful piece of music. Thank you for teaching me a lesson, sir. Never underestimate others." Someone secretly added to Brosnan's words, "Never underestimate a person with physical defects. God knows whether a blind person's hearing is particularly terrifying, and God knows whether a deaf person is Beethoven." Qin Guang, who had successfully shown off, was also in a good mood. Sitting on a chair, he nodded at Brosnan in a manner that was full of seniority. "Mr. Brosnan, you're too polite. You're also very outstanding." "Thank you for your compliment, sir. May I know your name?" Qin Guang thought for a moment. "Just call me Blake." While speaking, he did not deviate from his world-class acting skills. Instead, he made his behavior and tone seem like a real blind master. Brosnan said again, "Okay, Mr. Blake." Qin Guang nodded slightly. "Now shall we play the next piece?" Brosnan nodded. "Sorry, I need to take a puff or two to calm down." After he comfortably took 2 puffs of his cigar, he suddenly realized something. "Aren't I just like Jerry in the movie?" The crowd burst into laughter. Brosnan blushed. "I'm not as good as Mr. Jerry Morton, but Mr. Blake, you..." Qin Guang interrupted him. "I'm not 1900. I'm standing on the land of Princeton and I won't drown in the sea." The crowd in the cafe laughed again. Chapter 1100. Brosnan took a deep breath, adjusted his mood and played "Come Back, Dad, Dad, Come Back," which sounded similar to Silent Night, but was actually a song that 1900 himself had adapted from a child singing. Brosnan also added his own and Malfoy Bentler's adaptations, which further elevated the song, which had seemed immature but lacked depth in the film's original soundtrack. When he finished playing, the audience still enjoyed it. No one could deny the subtlety of his adaptation. But after a brief moment of amazement, the audience turned their eyes to the blind Blake, who had been sitting motionless on the stool from beginning to end. They were already looking forward to his performance. This time Qin Guang sat on the stool and Brosnan even adjusted the height of the chair for him. Qin Guang was not in a hurry to play. Instead he turned his head and said, "Thank you. Your adaptation was great, but it was more like Silent Night than Come Back, Dad, Come Back. Your adaptation has some flashy content, but it lacks some childishness. This is not the real Come Back, Dad, Come Back." You can even say that the song composed by Ennio Morricone and performed by Gita Buddha is not 1900's Come Back, Dad, Come Back. Their works pursue childlike innocence excessively, but they are too crude. The songs shown in the movie are good for deceiving laymen, but in my eyes they are full of flaws. That is the childlike innocence of adults, not the childlike innocence of children performed in 1900. If he had said this before, he would probably have been beaten up. But now no one dared to question his judgment. At least even if they were dissatisfied, they still kept silent. Only a few people in the crowd, such as Irma Watson, showed disdain and dissatisfaction on their faces. She was a loyal fan of Pianist on the Sea, and in her eyes the soundtrack of the film was a real master. Although she didn't deny Mr. Black's talent, it was a little too arrogant for him to attack Brosnan and then Ono. However, Qin Guang paid no attention to the peculiar gazes and continued. Although the story in 1900 was made up by the movie, can we understand it as a fictional world? The world that only appeared on the screen, can we view it as a real world? At this time someone rushed to answer. Mr. Blake, your words are very similar to the book written by the Wuxia Xian that I read before. It's like what he said about the World School of Performing Arts. Qin Guang smiled and nodded. Yes, I think so too. Alright, let's get back to our music. So, if the world of 1900 really existed, what would the real performance of Come Back, Dad, performed by 1900 in his own world be like? Like what Ono and Jetta acted out? Or is it like what Alessandro Barrico, the author of the screenplay, wrote in his book? People were lost in thought. On the one hand, they were thinking about what Qin Guang had said and trying their best to guess the real appearance of Come Back, Dad. On the other hand, they were trying to figure out Qin Guang's World School of Performing Arts. After all, the people here did not have much to do with the film. Except for Irma, they did not read World School of Performing Arts. Many people thought that it was a farce made by the Wuxia people. It was not called film art but metaphysics. It could even be called philosophy, but it was not performing arts. Although 1900 adapted the clumsy music sung by a little boy, he himself was a very pure person. So his music and his innocence should be like this. When the music started again, the people's argument quickly stopped. No matter whether they were convinced or not, they still had to listen to it. About a few minutes later, Qin Guang's fingers gradually stopped. People felt very complicated and they did not know how to describe it. Although Qin Guang's performance couldn't be considered beautiful, no one would agree to it if they were to say that it was bad. It was unique, weird, and strange, which made people feel that it was good but not good at the same time. They felt that the music was full of flaws. However, when they thought about it after it was played, they felt that it was natural, as if it was supposed to be like this. In the end, it was Brosnan who summed up the confusion in everyone's mind. Mr. Blake, although I don't quite understand it, I always feel that this seems to be what 1900 should be like if that world really exists. Everyone suddenly understood. That's right. That's right. Thank you, the great Mr. Blake. Qin Guang stood up and slightly pressed his hand down. For us, the world of 1900 is fictional, but for him, his world certainly exists. It could even be said that in every novel, every character and every story, they all had a real world that existed. In that case, this song is indeed real, and it should be so. As soon as he finished his words, the cafe suddenly burst into thunderous applause. People cheered and screamed. Hiding in the crowd, Irma looked at the blind man in sunglasses. She did not know how to describe her feelings at the moment. She really did not want to admit that this man's work was better than Ennio's and Gida's, but it had become a fact that could not be refuted. Irma had never thought that artistic achievements could be quantified so easily. The gap between good and better was so vivid in reality that it was almost within reach. She was very confused, but it did not affect her admiration for this Mr. Blake. She even knew that the name Blake must be an alias. Maybe because he knew that he was blind and felt that his world was dark, so when people asked him for his name he would casually say Blake. If Qin Guang knew what Irma was thinking, he would probably laugh. It's really not that deep. You think I'm blind because my acting is too good. In fact, it's because my name is Right Chin. I don't want you to associate me with Right Chin, so I specifically used an antonym. Right represents the light and Blake represents the darkness. Mr. Blake, I don't have the courage to continue playing the next few songs. How about you finish the performance? Brosnan, after a brief hesitation, did not sit on the stool after Qin Guang. Instead he spoke humbly. Qin Guang did not stand on ceremony with him. He could not go to the castle villa even if he continued to stay here. He just wanted to quickly show off and leave. He would go back at night and change into his night clothes. Ahem, a song called The Crave for All of You. This is The Crave by Jeremy Morton. A few minutes later, Everyone was crying their hearts out. Qin Guang did not give the crowd time to breathe. He said again, "This is the Crave by 1900. His performance was not perfect, but it was terrifying that he vividly displayed the state of 1900 after its emotions were affected. It even gave the audience the illusion that he was the 1900 sitting in front of the piano, and Brosnan standing behind him was the king of jazz, Jeremiah Morton. And we are the audience sitting in the third-class bar of the Virginian?" Qin Guang completely brought the audience into the world of 1900. Now I'd like to present you the song Enduring Movement. This time, Qin Guang did not jump to the position of Jeremiah Morton. Instead he went straight to the last song of 1900. When the storm-like notes suddenly stopped, the audience's faces were as cold as frost. It was as if they were standing on the side of the Virginian and had been hit hard by the sea storm. They wiped their faces and found that their palms were wet with sweat. They had not expected that they would sweat while listening to a piece of piano music. The audience gradually came to their senses and focused their eyes on the piano on the stage. They were surprised to find that Mr. Blake, who should have been sitting there, had disappeared. Where is he? At this moment Brosnan's body was trembling and his hands were shaking. He took out a pack of Marlboros from his pocket and gently put the cigarette butt on the strings of the Mississippi Pearl. The flame lit up like stars. Brosnan raised the butt of his cigarette. It burned very slowly, but it was beautiful. There was no sound in the cafe. People seemed to be able to hear the rustling sound of the burning cigarette butt. Brosnan's movements were just like 1900 in the movie, but no one thought he was 1900. The real 1900 Mr. Blake had left. The hockey players sitting at the entrance of the cafe were the first to react. They rushed to the door only to find that it was empty outside. Mr. Blake was nowhere to be seen. People turned back to question the punk band members who had been sitting at the same table as Qin Guang. What did these poor young people know? They could not answer anything. Others asked them what they had talked about with Mr. Blake. Although they also admired Blake, they were still quite indignant about what had happened to them just now. Therefore they exaggerated and described Qin Guang's arrogance and unreasonableness. Unexpectedly, after the others heard it, they did not feel like they had a common enemy. Instead they were all amazed. This is the character of a real great artist. Handsome. So handsome. Even if he is blind, I want to have children with him. The unruly great artist. It's a pity that we couldn't get his phone number. Who do you think he could be? God knows. I can't think of any possible identity. Blake is a fake name, right? Yes, the night gave me black eyes, but I used them to find the light. This is what a Wuxia poet said. I think it's the best way to describe Mr. Blake. Irma was also in the crowd, but she did not say a word. A name popped up in her mind. Although it seemed unbelievable after all, everyone knew that the Wuxia Qin Guang was not blind. That Mr. Blake could not have been pretending to be blind, whether it was the small movements he made when he walked or other aspects. Irma swore with her most professional actor's eyes. But Blake's character and the Wuxia Qin Guang's character. The same black hair, the same arrogance, and the same recognition of the world's performing arts. Oh yes, the Wuxia Qin Guang's piano skills were also very scary. The most important thing was the Wuxia Qin Guang's perfect acting skills. These two people were probably the same person. Irma thought so. But we would never have thought that not only could he play the piano, but his artistic achievements were also so high. If he did not act in movies, he would definitely become the greatest pianist in history. Chapter 1101. But the next moment Irma came to her senses. No, his World Faction Performing Arts was also the greatest performing arts monograph in human history. He had forcibly elevated the performing arts to a whole new level. Irma Watson squeezed her satchel, which contained the second volume of World Faction. She had bought a big gift pack of the hardback book, which cost $29 along with the movie tickets. It was now out of print. She had finished reading the first volume and was now eagerly reading the second volume. The theory in the book was a little difficult for her to understand. This was because her attitude was different from that of ordinary people. Ordinary people could treat such a book as a novel or a reading book, but she was different. She was a professional actress. After discovering the meaning of the book, she treated it with the attitude she had when she was in university. She required herself to have a deep understanding of every paragraph in the book, which made her study slower than ordinary people. She even felt that she might have to read it 5 or 6 times. Apart from the second volume of World Faction, she also had a notebook wrapped in calf leather in her bag. It was filled with her notes. She felt that she might have to fill another 5 or 6 notebooks. Although she had not finished reading World Faction as a professional actress, Irma's intuition told her that the Chinese Qin Guang's achievements in the performing arts should also be world-class, not inferior to his achievements in the piano. Irma walked out of the cafe unknowingly. Looking at the people outside, her mind fell into endless confusion. Was there really such a great person in this world? Was that Chinese man sent by God to rule the arts? If one day he suddenly said that he wanted to paint, and his paintings were comparable to Da Vinci's or Van Gogh's, wouldn't it be too surprising? I almost forgot that he did know how to sculpt, but it was just a subcategory of sculpture called microsculpture. At that moment, Qin Guang did not know that he had successfully made Irma Watson a fan. He was sitting in his hotel room feeling extremely pained. His face looked as if he had eaten 3 pounds of flies. He really did not know how much the Oscar judges in Eton Manor feared him if he did not personally ask around. That Malfoy Bentler even stood up for the keynote concert with Brosnan. You can do it. You really can. Buddy, I'm going to double-click 666 100 times. Boss, what's the situation? Fong Tianyu opened the door and poked his head in. Let's not talk about it. How about going downstairs for dinner? Qin Guang turned his head and looked at Fong's head. I say, Xiaofeng, if I directly state the price and spread the word that I'll get $100,000 for every hour I talk to you, will those big shots come? Fong Tianyu shook his head like a rattle drum. No. Absolutely not. Qin Guang asked, why? Fong Tianyu pinched his fingers and calculated. In North America, a foreign supermodel would usually accompany a foreign woman to eat and play. This price is going to make people think the wrong way. F***ck. Your way of thinking is too that. But didn't Donald Jostein run naked just now? Isn't it normal for others to think that you're interested in old chrysanthemums? Qin Guang silently looked at Fong Tianyu's face, not saying a word for a long time. Fong Tianyu turned and ran away. Boss, I'll get someone to send you dinner later. Qin Guang shouted from behind, come back here. There's something else. After waiting for a few minutes, Fong Tianyu mustered up the courage to open the door again. Qin Guang sighed. There's no other way. Prepare a night suit for me. F***ck boss, are you serious? You'll get a heavy sentence. Qin Guang looked at Fong Tianyu as if he wanted to eat him alive. What the F***ck are you thinking about? What do you know? I'm going to make a dirty deal with them. Fong Tianyu trembled violently. Oh my god. Qin Guang realized that he had said the wrong thing. Don't F***king think about it. I'm not talking about that kind of dirty deal. No, it's okay, boss. I won't laugh at you. Are you tired of living? I just want to talk to them. Okay. Boss, I'll go do something first. In the end, Fong Tianyu turned and ran away. Qin Guang felt that after he was done with this matter and returned to China, he must find a suitable reason to improve the fighting skills of his 4 great warriors, especially Fong Tianyu and Lu Xiaoyang, who were in cahoots with each other. This is for your own good. If you follow me, you'll definitely be hated by others. If you train your skills better, you won't be beaten up by others on the streets. This is for your own good. Just as he was complaining, Fong Tianyu came back. Qin Guang laughed sinisterly. You'll come, Fong Tianyu. I suddenly feel that it's easy to make enemies when you follow me. Stick your head in here. I'll give you a buff and teach you some self-defense skills. Fong Tianyu would not fall for this trick. Boss, I don't want 8 blessings. There's a beauty outside who wants to see you. Qin Guang's expression brightened. Who is it? Are their breasts big? Is their figure good? Is it expensive? Fong Tianyu. 5 minutes later, Qin Guang met an unexpected person in the living room of the suite. It was Irma Watson. He did not expect this girl to follow him here and was very surprised. After all, in his eyes, although his disguise was clumsy, his world-class acting skills at that time were flawless. Irma Watson could not have broken free from the boundaries of his acting skills. How did she see through him? Qin Guang sized up Irma and Irma sized up Qin Guang. Mr. Qin, I didn't see through you. I only found you because of my intuition as an actor. Your performance in Brosnan's cafe was impeccable. It was not until I saw your fingers that I was sure that Blake and Wright were the same person. Darkness and light. Mr. Qin, you really know how to name yourself. To his surprise, Irma spoke first and dispelled Qin Guang's doubts. Qin Guang shrugged. Fine. A woman's intuition is really the most powerful mirror in the world. Mirror? What's that? You can think of it as Harry Potter's anti-magic spell. Irma smiled. I'm not Irma Watson. Qin Guang nodded. I know. What can I do for you? You're not mocking me on behalf of William Jones, are you? I remember you are his friend. Irma shook her head and combed her long brown hair. I don't know Mr. Jones very well. Attending his premiere was just a task that my grandfather gave me. Who's your grandfather? James Watson. Qin Guang raised his eyebrows. Sounds like a big shot. Irma nodded. He used to be, but not anymore. My grandfather is the former chairman of the Oscar committee. Qin Guang's interest was piqued. He did not expect Irma to be so direct. So what's your purpose in looking for me? Irma suddenly became excited. Mr. Qin, before I met you in the coffee shop, I was reading your World Pie. I don't care what other people think of you, but I feel that if you really wrote this book, your achievements in the performing arts are unprecedented. Although Qin Guang was often fawned on by others, he felt a little embarrassed when he was fawned on by an international friend. Furthermore, it was a long-haired lady who wasn't particularly stunning. Furthermore, she was the granddaughter of the previous chairman of the Academy Awards. Ms. Watson, you have good taste. Irma covered her mouth and laughed. Mr. Qin, you are as straightforward as people say. I used to think that you were rude, but now I understand that your confidence stems from your achievements. It's not rude. Qin Guang nodded. That's right. Those who look down on me are blind. Irma Watson nodded. That's right. My grandfather is also senile. I especially admire people who put righteousness before family. You can't lose justice just because of friendship. Irma nodded again. That's right. Also, I heard your performance in the coffee shop today. Do you know what they said about you after you left? Qin Guang chuckled. Irma, you're too polite. Just call me right. What did they say about me? They said that Mr. Qin is the greatest pianist in the last 100 years. You flatter me. I don't deserve it. Qin Guang was not being modest at all. He was just a human jukebox. Asking him to compose was asking for his life. The greatest pianist lived up to his name, but being an artist was a waste. Right, you know how to be modest. But I feel that ever since you came to America, you've been treated unfairly. I think this can't go on. It will become a stain on the history of art. Finally, Irma spoke the words that Qin Guang wanted to hear the most. Qin Guang let out a long sigh. Why didn't I know you earlier? There are so few reasonable Americans like you, Irma. I came to Princeton for this purpose, but they didn't want to see me. I'm so upset that I can't sleep. Irma suddenly felt uneasy. My grandpa's worries are not unreasonable. After all, Mr. Xian, don't say any more. This is the idiot Donald's own decision. If he had told me earlier that he planned to fulfill his promise, I would have been the first to jump out and stop him. Qin Guang then told him about the bet between Donald Xian and Tang Xiao. After Irma heard that, he could not help but laugh hysterically after holding it in for a long time. He only managed to catch his breath after a while and said, in other words, this is Mr. Xian's own decision? Nonsense. His body is so bad. Who wants to see him naked? Then you're really screwed by Mr. Xian. Of course. This is the biggest setback I've ever experienced since I started my career. Irma suddenly stood up and clenched her fists. So, right, I want to help you. If Qin Guang was not afraid that he would accidentally attract girls abroad, he would have hugged her by the waist. This was the only real human warmth that he had encountered since he started his career in the North American film industry. Wait a minute, I'll call my grandpa and ask him to come here. Qin Guang was puzzled. Mr. Watson is also in Princeton? Yes, grandpa is in the castle. Qin Guang looked down at the celebrity encyclopedia on his phone. He likes to wear Mickey Mouse underwear. Yes, right, how did you know? Qin Guang silently covered his face. I really don't want to know. That's the nightmare of my life. After waiting for about an hour, Qin Guang and Irma had dinner together. James Watson finally arrived, but he refused to meet in the hotel room. He insisted on meeting in the park opposite the hotel. Helpless, Qin Guang and Irma went downstairs side by side. They sat on a bench in the park for a full 20 minutes before the old man sneaked out. In fact, Qin Guang already knew that he was hiding behind a bush not far away, secretly looking at him. However, he could not drag him out. Come over here. Stay away from him. Old James stood 5 meters away like a retired agent, waving at Irma from afar. At the same time he looked at Qin Guang with a guarded expression. The two had to spend a full 10 minutes to dispel old James' suspicions. He burst out laughing like Irma. At the same time, Qin Guang felt that the laughter of the two of them had been passed down from generation to generation. It was as if they were sawing wood. Mr. Watson, I really don't have any bad intentions. I really want to do something for the film industry. You can think that I'm shameless, but I feel that I've already shown enough sincerity and respect for the Oscars by writing World's Pie and Making Women. This award is very important to me. It's a matter of life and death. I can't wait a year. Qin Guang and old James struggled to explain. But old James had obviously not seen World's Pie or Women. Although he had his granddaughter as a middleman, he still looked doubtful. Irma, who was next to him, was furious. My dear grandpa, what did you teach me in the past? If you want to question something, you have to understand it first. You also told me not to discriminate against others just because their skin color is darker than ours. Obama and Bush are both our presidents. But why did you suspect Mr. Qin just because of his skin color? Old James blushed at Irma's words. He waved his hands and said, Okay. It's 8 o'clock in the evening. There will be a screening of Women in half an hour. Why don't we go and watch it now? Irma was overjoyed. Grandpa, you seem to know a lot about the screening schedule for Women. Old James sighed. How could I not? The box office of this movie today has almost broken $50 million. The movies made by our peers are almost suffocating from the pressure. Qin Guang was shocked. It's even higher than yesterday? That's impossible. Old James looked back at him. Even you don't think it's possible, let alone us. Forget it. Let's go and see. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, Qin Guang and Irma walked out of the cinema with old James on each side. Poor old James. As a veteran director, his understanding of movies was far beyond that of ordinary people. That was why he fell deeper than those medical experts and piano masters. The three of them walked all the way to the brightly lit park before old James suddenly let out a shout. God. My dear God. Jesus, why didn't I see this great movie 50 years earlier? Let me see Right Chen's great performance earlier. Oh my God. I just want to kneel down to the great Right Chen. What kind of stupid mistake did I make? Qin Guang really blushed this time. Cultured people are really different. They're really good at flattering people. I'm about to fly into the sky. It really wasn't easy for me. I finally found a breakthrough. Chapter 1102. Mr. Watson, then, shall we go to Eaton Manor now? After waiting for another 10 minutes or so, old James finally calmed down and Qin Guang said excitedly. He couldn't wait to convince all the members of the Motion Picture Association. Whether it was the box office or the reputation, Women had reached the standard for the Oscars. However, Hollywood's seemingly fair selection was more complicated than expected. Otherwise, every film that tried to compete for the Oscars, especially the Best Picture, Best Actor and Best Actress, wouldn't have to spend tens of millions of dollars on public relations. In addition to the quality and standard of the film itself, there were often many side effects that would affect the final result. After all, in the past many years, there had been more than one film that reached the standard of the Oscars in a year. The evaluation of film art awards had never been completely fair, and it was almost impossible for a film to be overwhelmingly strong. After all, film art was always a matter of different opinions. This time, although Qin Guang's Women had an overwhelming advantage over the other competitors, including Sunshine and July, as well as the films of the same period released last year, and its box office was also phenomenal, there were several blockbusters that had similar box office performance as Women this year. However, the box office had never been an important criterion for the Oscars. It was far from enough to win an Oscar based on the box office alone. Qin Guang couldn't hope to cater to all the judges, but he had to at least rope in a few heavyweights among the judges. At least he had to get through the preliminary selection and get on the list of nominees. If he couldn't even get on the list, he wouldn't be able to win an award. I'm sorry, Mr. Qin, I may not be able to agree to your request. We can't go to Eaton Manor now. Unexpectedly, after a short consideration, old James rejected Qin Guang's proposal. Qin Guang's expression changed slightly. He didn't quite understand, so he turned to look at Elma Watson next to him. Elma understood Qin Guang's meaning and asked, Grandpa, why? James Watson gestured for the two of them to sit on the park benches. Mr. Chen, it's not that I don't want to help you. I also think that you're worth it. However, it has been almost 5 years since I left my post as the president of the American Film Association and the chairman of the Academy Awards Committee. Although the people in the association still respect me and respect my attitude because of my qualifications and reputation, I am no longer in office. I am just an ordinary judge. Hearing those words, Qin Guang instantly figured it out and asked, Mr. Watson, you mean the current president? Old James nodded but then shook his head. I don't have any conflicts with Fred and he respects me very much. But at the same time, I have to maintain sufficient recognition of his authority. After all, I've already stepped down. Mr. Qin, do you understand what I mean? Qin Guang nodded. I know. How could I not know? What's all this scheming? I recommend you to watch a Chinese television series called The Name of the People. Your thick black theory is child's play. Completely child's play. Beside him, Alma interrupted. Recently, other than your movie, this Chinese television series has also exploded on social media, but it doesn't have English subtitles. I heard that it's the Chinese version of House of Cards? Let's not talk about House of Cards anymore. Mr. Watson, can you tell me what we should do now? I've prepared a very sufficient budget, absolutely sufficient. As long as the judges are willing, my budget can let everyone travel around the world for more than 3.5 weeks. It was not easy to talk about feelings, so Qin Guang went straight to the point and talked about money. A problem that could be solved with money was not a problem. Right now he just wanted to solve all problems in a more convenient way. Old James smiled. Mr. Qin, we all know your budget, but that's not important. Although everyone loves American dollars, the senior members of the American Film Association are not poor. It's not that we need American dollars. Don't worry, there are still more than 20 days before the primaries. When I go back, I'll learn from Elma and privately contact a few senior members who are close to me. I'll convince them one by one, and when the time is right, I'll invite you to meet everyone. Qin Guang understood what old James meant. He still had to use the method of boiling a frog in warm water to slowly penetrate it. He was quite annoyed about this. It was not his style to not cut the Gordian knot when doing things. However, there was no other way. He wanted to succeed in one go, but it seemed that Donald's nude running had left too much of a psychological scar on the others. Old James comforted him instead. Mr. Qin, don't worry too much. Just like what you said, you want the Oscars to be the Oscars for the filmmakers. I don't deny that too many political factors have been mixed into the Oscars over the years, and there's no guarantee that the Oscars will change in the future. But at least this year your women, and World's faction, have shown achievements that transcend time. We have to respect that. As long as you can get into the nomination list, no matter how resistant my old friends are, they'll still have to watch your movie in the end. They won't be any better than I am then. If I can't convince more people, I'll be able to get the movie through the primaries by myself. I promise you. But if I bring you back today, they'll think that you did something to me. Old James did not finish his sentence, but Qin Guang remembered the old man's Mickey Mouse underwear. Qin Guang nodded. Okay, that's all we can do for now. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Watson. After's done. Old James shook his head. Don't give me money. If your movie is only at the level of The Sunshine Man, you'll have to spend money to get nominated. But you're different. You're Qin Guang and your movie is women. From the standpoint of a filmmaker, we should be the ones giving you money to thank you for your great contribution to the film industry. In the end, Qin Guang was flattered by the old man to the point that he looked like a celestial being. Just as he was about to chat for a while, Qin Guang suddenly received a call from Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian said that several research institutions had finally found out where they lived in Princeton. The heads of several institutions had come together overnight. Helplessly getting up, Qin Guang looked at Irma and opened his mouth. He was about to open his mouth when old James suddenly pulled his granddaughter away. Nice to meet you, Mr. Qin. It's too late tonight. See you another day. Before he finished speaking, old James had already dragged Irma away. He did not look like an old man at all. He was clearly a 100-meter sprint champion. Qin Guang was stunned. He was furious. This old man was looking down on him. What kind of person do you think I am? Do you think I'm the kind of young master who goes around flirting? The old man has so many beauties that he can't even take care of himself. Why would he be interested in your Irma? Qin Guang, who was wearing a big tent, got up and walked away with a straight face. When Qin Guang returned to the hotel, it was already 11 o'clock at night. Princeton was not a city with a rich nightlife. The street outside the hotel was already empty, but the entrance of the hotel was bustling with people. Finally, when Qin Guang appeared, the project leaders of major scientific research institutions almost burst into tears. Ever since they saw the molecular formula in the magazine the night before yesterday, they had not had a good night's sleep. Bravo and Wertzman knew what was good, and so did the heads of other major scientific research institutions and top experts. Everyone could understand the huge market behind this set of molecular formulas. That was why they had rushed here like crazy yesterday and tried to get in touch with the developer of the molecular formula, which was Zhou Xian herself. Although Zhou Xian was easy to deal with, she insisted that she did not own the intellectual property rights. In the end, the person who made the final decision was Qin Guang. The purchase of the equipment was easy to negotiate, but Zhou Xian even tried to poach him on the spot. When it came to the molecular formula and the undisclosed molecular formula, as well as more intellectual property cooperation, Zhou Xian began to push the matter to the back and forth. This made everyone very awkward and helpless. Many of the relevant heads of scientific research institutions did not expect that the Qin Guang that Zhou Xian was talking about was Qin Guang, who had recently turned the American film industry upside down with women. After being rejected for a whole day, the heads of major scientific research institutions had no choice but to use the name Qin Guang. It was not difficult to find out who Qin Guang was. After all, he had appeared in the Princeton District Court and was on the news. Although the directors of the major research institutions almost thought that they were blind when they discovered that the two were actually the same person, they were all experienced people after all. They quickly calmed down and accepted the rather bizarre fact. It was not difficult to find out where Qin Guang and Zhou Xian were staying. Soon, the major institutions confirmed where Qin Guang was staying. This was a market worth hundreds of billions of dollars. In this kind of business, things that could be done today should not be delayed until tomorrow. God knows who would be shameless enough to knock on the door at the speed of light. Hence, everyone rushed to the hotel that Qin Guang was staying in. But when they arrived, they awkwardly discovered that everyone else was thinking the same thing as well. The heads of the University of California, Cambridge, Oxford, Waseda, Rockefeller Laboratory, Lincoln Laboratory, Cavendish Laboratory, Xianxia Corporation, and other institutions as well as the representatives of the American branch, were not willing to give in. The many scientific research institutions that originally only planned to cooperate privately had to face this very awkward situation. There was obviously no way to communicate privately, and it was likely that they would have to face a situation of public bidding. Chapter 1103. This was a rare experience for many of the major companies that had monopolized the world's technology. In the past, it was always others who rushed to their doorstep to seek cooperation with them. They were the ones who sat on the fishing platform and waited for others to give them benefits. It was always others who begged them to cooperate. Sometimes they might take the initiative to extend an olive branch to others, but there had never been a situation where they would rush to someone else's doorstep after reading the news the day before, only to bump into someone else in the same industry. Everyone was like a shark that smelled blood. They were prepared to take advantage of the disparity in resources and information to snatch this piece of fat meat from the jaws of Prince's laboratory. However, when they arrived at the scene, they were not sharks at all. Everyone was clearly a group of pugs fighting for food. The people from Xianxia suggested that everyone leave today and hold a meeting overnight. This way, the giants could reach a certain degree of consensus in private so that they wouldn't be at a complete disadvantage in the negotiations with Qin Guang. After all, practically all the major companies in the field of photocatalysis had gathered here. Since everyone had reached a consensus, they could naturally force Qin Guang's side to submit. They could grab Qin Guang's neck from the flow of industry talents, equipment and raw materials procurement channels. This sounded wonderful. If the thing they were fighting for wasn't so hot, they might have reached an agreement. Unfortunately, no one was a fool. Everyone knew how the Koreans did things. They would hold a meeting here and then they would secretly send someone to negotiate with the other party. They were despicable and sinister. By the time they came back to their senses, the other party would have signed an exclusive agreement with the other party at a lower price. This wasn't some random cabbage on the street. It was the result of photocatalysis. It was like the crouching dragon and phoenix of the Three Kingdoms period. Who dared to relax? Who dared to bet on whether the Koreans were moral or not? Also, not only did they have to be wary of the Koreans, they had to be wary of everyone. Most importantly, Qin Guang had heavy technology in his hands that could explode the entire industry. He was the leader. As long as he nodded, he could instantly create a giant hole in the so-called monopoly barrier formed by the major companies. When the technology level was completely crushed, the so-called industry barrier was a joke. F***ck off. Shameless Koreans. Go away. Stupid Koreans. In the end, the impromptu negotiation at the entrance of the hotel ended on bad terms. Everyone was suspicious of each other. Some of them even wanted to send someone out alone to search, but the others in the same trade would desperately stop them. However, on one matter they reached a very mysterious consensus. 5 of the reputable institutions in the industry would jointly send people to stop Princeton's local snake, which was also the most authoritative laboratory in the field of photocatalysts. As soon as Qin Guang's figure appeared at the entrance of the hotel, he was immediately surrounded by people. Qin Guang peeked into the crowd and was slightly disappointed when he didn't see Prince's men. He had originally planned to use this late, almost public bidding meeting to put some pressure on Prince, but in the end no one came, so there was nothing he could do. Prince, you're not doing your best. This is your territory after all. Look at the attitude of others and then look at your own performance. It's too disappointing. Do I really have to consider changing to another research institute? If it wasn't for the fact that Prince was indeed leading in the field of photocatalysis, Qin Guang really wanted to replace him. The current situation made him a little embarrassed. Forget it, I'll just try to talk to them first. I originally wanted to put pressure on Prince anyway. They can't be indifferent to the God-level formula. Mr. Qin. I'm from the Alamo Laboratory at the University of California. Mr. Qin, let's talk. I'm from the Lincoln Laboratory at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Mr. Qin. Qin Guang was surrounded so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. These people were either experts in the academic world or the heads of various organizations and companies. They weren't as arrogant as they usually were, and they were as passionate as students asking their teacher questions. In Qin Guang's opinion, it wouldn't be a problem for him to receive more people, but his nose couldn't take it. This group of men is so unreasonable. You guys are obviously here to talk business. Can't you guys take a good bath first? Are you guys trying to kill me? Otherwise, can you guys send some good-looking girls to caress the old man? Although the old man was known in the pugilistic world as Lu Xiaohui, as long as the girls were beautiful enough, it was not impossible to talk to them. It was no wonder that Qin Guang in the crowd felt like he had fallen into the devil's den. However, he couldn't blame others for not showering. International people were born with a stronger body odor. Moreover, most of the people around Qin Guang were fat people with big bellies. Of course, the smell was very sour, like pickled cabbage in an old jar. Everyone make way. All of you make way for me. Can't you let me pass? Qin Guang wanted to escape from the crowd, but he couldn't reject the hospitality of these fellows. Although they were plump, their faces were pale, and he was afraid that he might accidentally injure them. In the end, he had no choice but to roar out. After finally escaping from the crowd, Qin Guang said immediately, "Don't push. Everyone, don't push. I'll arrange the meeting room now. If you have anything to say, we can talk in the meeting room." After saying that, Qin Guang didn't care whether others listened or not. He rushed straight to the front desk of the hotel and asked the hotel staff to prepare. Then Qin Guang handed over the task of entertaining people to the hotel staff with a $2,000 tip. He asked everyone to wait in the meeting room while he went upstairs to look for Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian had been waiting for him to come back. She was still awake. When Qin Guang knocked on the door, she had just finished organizing her documents. Opening the door, Zhou Xian asked with a smile, "You're back? How's the discussion about the movie going?" Qin Guang was in a good mood. There's progress. What are you busy with? If you want to sleep, you can sleep first. I'll go talk to them. Zhou Xian shook her head. I can't do that. You were the one who threw this to me, but I'm lazy and thin-skinned. I don't know how to refuse others, and I'm afraid of taking responsibility. That's why I pushed it to you. But I'll still attend this meeting. Qin Guang pinched Zhou Xian's butt. I say, why else would they wait for me in the middle of the night? Go. We can talk about this and rest early. Wait a minute, this is the information I just finished organizing. Take a look first. Qin Guang took the things that Zhou Xian handed over and spent 7 or 8 minutes quickly browsing through them. Zhou Jingxi was very meticulous. In this document she wrote very clearly about the current situation of the institutions that came to Princeton to participate in the competition in the field of photocatalysis. From the past results of the major scientific research institutions to their current facilities, equipment and staffing, everything was there. It also included their next investment plans in the field of photocatalysis. That's amazing. Qin Guang praised. Zhou Jingxi smiled embarrassedly. They took the initiative to provide it to me. I just organized it so that you could look it up. Unfortunately, it seems that Prince is still the strongest. The other institutions have some hardware and software gaps. It's okay. They're all pretenses. Why didn't anyone from China come? Teacher Xu called. Gokyo University and the Chinese Academy of Sciences both wanted to participate, but their conditions were too different. I didn't dare to agree immediately, but I didn't reject them either. It's okay. We'll go back and talk to them. Let's go. Qin Guang took the documents and went out first. It was almost 11:30 p.m. After a few steps he remembered something. Didn't I say we don't want Wasida's people? Why are they here too? Zhou Jingxi shrugged. Others don't know, but Wasida is second only to Prince. Are we really going to reject them directly? If we don't end up negotiating with Prince, we should be able to contact Wasida within 3 months. Qin Guang waved his hand. No, definitely not. I'd rather not talk to Wasida than Tangshan. Also, I won't talk to the Koreans. At this time the people from Wasida and Sanxing were waiting excitedly in the conference room. They had no idea that they had sentenced Qin Guang to death in advance. The people from Wasida were the most miserable. At this moment they were the most excited. Whether it was the cooperation conditions or the hard standards of their own laboratory, as long as Qin Guang did not choose Prince, they had an overwhelming advantage over other competitors. But what if Qin Guang was an unreasonable nationalistic youth? Chapter 1104. Zhou Jingxi couldn't understand Qin Guang's inexplicable stubbornness. After all, as a researcher, if he wanted to make a real achievement in the field of knowledge, he had to have a tolerant mindset and boldness. Only by doing everything possible to learn and make use of all advanced resources and knowledge could one's knowledge surpass the limitations of national boundaries and reach a higher level. Although there were countries for scientists, there were no countries for science. According to Zhou Jingxi's original intention, even though she had worked at Prince for half a year, she didn't want Qin Guang to oppose Japan's Waseda University and Korea's Sanxing Group. However, she had an almost blind admiration for Qin Guang, so even though she was puzzled, she didn't question him again. Qin Guang saw through her thoughts and took the initiative to explain to her in the elevator, "Teacher Zhou, I actually have a reason for doing this." Zhou Jingxi turned her head and looked at him. She was quite touched that Qin Guang took the initiative to explain to her. This was the benefit of completely conquering a person's heart. Even such a small thing could move her. "It's okay, I'll support you no matter what decision you make." No, being convinced and being convinced are two different things. Let's put it this way. I don't deny Waseda University's global reputation, nor do I deny their ability in the field of scientific research. The same is true for Sanxing. But one thing is very important. No matter how successful they are in other fields, in the field of photocatalysis, they aren't even worthy of carrying our shoes. The fundamental purpose of the cooperation between the two parties is to exchange benefits, but the other party can't provide us with the benefits we need. They can only get benefits from us. Zhou Jingxi couldn't help but ask, "But isn't it the same for Cavendish Laboratory, Cambridge and MIT?" Qin Guang nodded. "That's true. Then the problem is, we are the ones who take the initiative to give benefits to others. Our fundamental purpose is to better promote photocatalysis and realize our own life ideals. We are almost philanthropists. But if one or two of our partners ruin our mood or even affect our interest and motivation to further promote technology, then not only will we not get benefits from the other party, but we will also be hindered. They may even become a stumbling block to technological innovation. Isn't there a need for such a situation?" Zhou Jingxi was stunned. She felt that what Qin Guang said was fallacious, but she couldn't refute him. His theory seemed high and mighty, but to put it bluntly, it was as simple as that. Working with Waseda and Sanmei will make him unhappy and he will not do it. After all this time, this fellow was still willful. Also, it's true that I've never intended to sign an exclusive agreement with anyone. Whoever is willing to pay a satisfactory price, We can provide technical support for them. When the number of our partners increases to 5 or even 10, it doesn't matter if 1 or 2 of them are missing when you look at the world. In addition, although our 5 God-level formulas have an overwhelming advantage, before materials science completely catches up with the development, our production capacity is ultimately limited, and it is impossible to completely monopolize the era of products. It's meaningless to cultivate more partners. The other partners, including Prince and the Chinese Academy of Sciences, have their own profit margins and survival conditions. Their products will also be sold all over the world. Japan and South Korea have used technology monopolies to get a lot of money from us over the years, and we don't give them the technology, forcing them to buy our finished products. This is reasonable. Just like Sony, have they ever given us their camera imaging technology for free? Zhou Xian said, it seems to be true, but they will also buy Prince or Cambridge products. They don't necessarily have to buy our products, right? Chen Guang shrugged. What does it matter? We will give more to others and be more generous to the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Isn't that enough? Let's eat the meat first and then let others drink some soup. The elevator door opened and Zhou Xian was completely convinced by Chen Guang. She replied to Chen Guang with a sentence that made him blush. You're amazing. You're so far-sighted. I'm sorry, I don't deserve it. Chen Guang secretly wiped his sweat. Fortunately, the old man knew how to bluff, or Teacher Zhou would have found out that he was a 50-cent fanatic. The two of them entered the conference room and the people in charge of the major technology companies and institutions all stood up. However, Chen Guang, who wasn't even 21, acted like an old man as he gestured for everyone to sit down with a smile. As soon as everyone sat down, people from many institutions rushed to speak first, intending to seize the initiative in the upcoming public competition. This should have been the most sophisticated technology exchange conference in the world, but in just a few seconds, it turned from a scholarly meeting into a noisy and chaotic market. If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't put down his pride, Chen Guang felt that they would have fought on the spot. Quiet down. Everyone quiet down. Chen Guang waved the information booklet that Zhou Xian had organized for him and shouted loudly. Seeing that no one paid attention to him, he had no choice but to slam the table heavily. Only then did he manage to control the situation. When the big shots finally quieted down, Chen Guang slammed the table again and said, Everyone stop arguing. It's useless. Everyone has the right to speak, but everyone here is a scholar and an elite from a major institution. You should know how to communicate the most efficiently, right? It's almost midnight now. Shouldn't we use the fastest efficiency to carry out the most public preliminary communication? It's impossible to reach an immediate consensus tonight. Then our main goal now is to improve the understanding between both sides. Then all of you can reevaluate our actual value. We also need to conduct a more comprehensive evaluation and consideration of your side. As for the real cooperation, we have to go back and talk about it step by step. So, everyone, please calm down first and complete the preliminary communication tonight as soon as possible. Then go back and rest early, right? The big shots first looked at each other and quickly calmed down. They all accepted Chen Guang's words in their hearts. But very quickly they looked at each other in dismay, revealing astonished expressions. They didn't expect Chen Guang to be so mature at the negotiating table and completely control the situation with just a few words. After all, although Chen Guang was famous in the past, other than his personal achievements, the flaws in his character were very obvious. He was obstinate, self-opinionated, arrogant, and unbridled. He vividly displayed almost all the flaws in a young man's character. If it had been a slightly weaker young man, his character would have long since faded into the crowd, or perhaps he would have been beaten to death. So far, not only had Chen Guang not fallen, but he had also become more and more famous. The fields he had dabbled in were getting wider and wider. It could only be because of his unrivaled talent, not because of the so-called mature and prudent character. But after a few more words today, these big shots from the big organizations realized that everyone had been deceived by Chen Guang in the past. This guy had deliberately acted unfamiliar and immature in front of outsiders, but in fact he was simply an old fox and experienced. This guy had hidden himself so deeply that it was terrifying to think about it. Mr. Chen is right. I agree. Everyone be quiet. Mr. Chen, why don't you let us introduce ourselves first? I'm from Wuxia. Chen Guang suddenly interrupted him. I'm sorry, please leave. The old professor from Wuxia was instantly stunned. Mr. Chen, why are you doing this? I'm an Inamoto. Qin Guang rolled his eyes. Don't you understand what I'm saying? I don't care if you're an Inamoto, herbaceous, or woody. I've said before that I won't come into contact with the Japanese representatives. Don't waste your time here. After Qin Guang finished speaking, he turned his face to the side. He looked like he was unhappy and did not want to talk to him. The eyes, nose, and mouth of the famous professor from Wuxia, Junzo Inamoto, were all squeezed together on his wrinkled face. He was so angry that his face was red. He pointed at Qin Guang angrily. How can you be like this? Wuxia is the world's leader in the field of photocatalysts. Your stupid attitude will make it difficult for you in the industry. Qin Guang still ignored him. But the people from the other organizations in the conference room could not take it anymore. You guys already have no chance. Isn't it a waste of time to pester here? What if he angered Qin Guang to the point that he decided to quit? If you guys don't want to talk, we'll talk. In addition, the other organizations were already very afraid of the people from Wuxia. They all saw them as one of their core competitors. Now that there was one less competitor without any bloodshed, everyone was looking forward to it. Professor Inamoto, don't waste everyone's time. That's right. Mr. Qin has already made his position clear. Professor Inamoto, why do you have to do this? Let's go, Professor Inamoto. You've already embarrassed Wuxia. Although they were all upper-class people, each of them was more venomous than the other when it came to adding insult to injury. When it came to personal interests, there was not much difference between a high-class person and a hooligan. It was just that the latter was unreasonable, while the former was verbal and murderous. Just like Professor Inamoto himself, he was not a kind person. Just now he knew that Qin Guang asked everyone to be quiet, but he still seized the opportunity to push Wuxia out. He almost succeeded, but unfortunately he ran into Qin Guang's gun. Professor Inamoto was ridiculed by everyone. Then he looked at Qin Guang's cold face and knew that he could not do anything today. He could only smile bitterly, turn around and leave. Seeing this, the people from Xianxia Corporation looked calm, but they were secretly delighted. The person in charge of Xianxia Corporation, Jin Tailon, was proud of himself. He thought to himself, who asked you Japanese to be arrogant? Who asked you Japanese to think that you're the best in the world? Who asked you Japanese to not admit your crimes? You deserve it. It's natural for the Chinese to hate you. Qin Guang did a good job. First, he helped us eliminate one of our strongest competitors. Then our terms will be much easier to talk about. They really did not expect that Qin Guang, a billionaire, would have such a flaw in his character. He was almost the same as those Chinese people who only knew how to clamor on the internet. His maturity just now was also an act. Chapter 1105. That's right. Last year, Sanqing's Note 7 had exploded in popularity, and we did not recall our phones back to China. We can still sue those Chinese consumers who accused us of this. The Chinese will still scold us on the internet and enjoy the coupons we give them like beggars. They will continue to buy Sanqing's phones. As the person in charge of China's affairs, Jin Tailon knew about the exploding phones in China last year. Although Sanqing had no choice but to recall their Note 7, they managed to get the majority of the Chinese consumers to change their Note 7 to S7. Their losses were manageable. In Jin Tailon's opinion, Qin Guang's immature behavior might seem like a nationalistic youth, but he's actually childish. As long as he had the chance to negotiate with him, he could easily fall into their trap. He was as stupid as those fake nationalists who scolded Sanqing on the internet and then waved their coupons to buy Sanqing's phones. What a joke. In today's global economy, we can't make money if you boycott us. Either you stop scolding us or you don't buy us. At least you can be considered a man. Just as Jin Tailon was thinking about this, the corners of his lips unconsciously curled up in a subtle arc. It was extremely rich in meaning. Disdain, mockery, joy, pride, all these emotions piled up on his face in an incomparably exquisite manner. After they were mixed together, he appeared incredibly calm. Suddenly, Jin Tailon's body trembled. He suddenly realized something and felt that something was wrong. The Japanese were in trouble and it seemed like he was also in danger. Recently, our Korea seems to be at odds with China because of some issues. And it was more serious than last year's fried chicken incident. He slowly regained his senses and turned around to meet Qin Guang's gaze. Qin Guang had a faint smile on his face, but in Jin Tailon's eyes, It was not a pleasant smile. Instead it was a cold feeling. "Sir, are you representing South Korea's Sanshin group?" Qin Guang asked like a spring breeze. Jean Tailon subconsciously wanted to nod, but he controlled himself in time and made a decision in his mind at the speed of light. He controlled his expression perfectly, coughed twice and said in fluent Chinese, "Mr. Qin, you've made a mistake. I did work for Sanxing before, but just this afternoon I reached an agreement with the Huaxiaolonghe group. Now I'm representing the Huaxiaolonghe group to negotiate with you." The Longhe group that Jean Tailon spoke of was of course true. On the surface, it seemed to be a wholly owned company in China, but it was actually a puppet enterprise that was completely controlled by the major shareholders of Sanxing Corporation through the offshore holding company, and after layers of dilution in the middle, it was actually a puppet enterprise. As Qin Guang squinted his eyes, Zhou Jingxi, who was beside him, was already searching for information about the Longhe group. Qin Guang glanced at him without batting an eyelid, then turned his head to look at Zhou Jingxi's computer screen. This Longhe group was indeed a leading company in the field of materials science in the country. Although it was not a leading company, it was still one of the industry leaders. On the other side, Jean Tailon spoke again. "Mr. Qin, I am a Chinese with a proper bloodline." This was also the best weapon for Jean Tailon to travel in China. Although his ancestral home was South Korea, he had been living in China for many years and could speak fluent Chinese. In addition, he also had yellow skin and black hair. Even his current household registration and nationality were Chinese because of his Chinese wife. As long as he deliberately pretended to be Chinese, he could pass off the fake as the real one. He was not afraid of Qin Guang's investigation. He had studied at Yenjing University since he was in university, and he was admitted through the General College entrance examination in Liaodong province. With Qin Guang's connections and means, he would be able to get to the bottom of it. However, Jean Tailon did not think that Qin Guang would investigate such a small matter. As long as he got through the next few days and signed the contract, everything would be fine. There was no difference between Longhe Group signing a contract with Qin Guang and Sanxing signing a contract with Qin Guang. Now that everyone was in the eastern part of the United States, how could Qin Guang have the time to investigate? Qin Guang's narrowed eyes became smaller and smaller, almost forming a line. He looked as if his interest had been aroused. When the others in the conference room saw this, they panicked. Everyone cursed in their hearts. Jean Tailon, this shameless guy, was playing the sentimental card on the spot. Despicable. They were extremely anxious, but Qin Guang seemed to be completely unaware that he had fallen into his trap and was still chatting happily with him. The others wanted to interrupt their conversation again, but they were troubled by Qin Guang's previous request, so they did not dare to speak rashly. They were so anxious that they could not control themselves. Suddenly, Qin Guang opened his mouth and said, "Which school is better at learning excavators?" Qin Guang also said this in Chinese. The people from the other institutions did not quite understand, but Jean Tailon, who was feeling very proud of himself, suddenly stiffened. He did not understand why Qin Guang would say such nonsense at the negotiating table. Jean Tailon did not understand Qin Guang's intentions, so he asked tentatively, "Mr. Qin, what are you talking about?" Qin Guang did not reply to him but asked again, "Which school is better at learning chefs?" Jean Tailon was still confused. "Huh?" Qin Guang finally glared angrily at him. "Profiteering." Jean Tailon was completely at a loss. What are you talking about?" Qin Guang waved his hand. "Get lost. Why are you pretending to be Chinese? Get your clothes. You can't even match the secret code. Get lost." Even when Jean Tailon was thrown out by a few other researchers, he still didn't understand how he had been exposed today. "My Chinese is so good that I can be a broadcaster, but why was Qin Guang able to see through me with just 3 sentences? Why is that, Sumida?" When the scene finally quieted down, Qin Guang then waved his hand. "Alright, now that the irrelevant people are gone, let's get down to business. Everyone, I have already seen your conditions. At present it seems that they are more or less the same and there is not much difference. However, in choosing a partner, other than the most direct economic benefits, we also have to consider your company's current research and production conditions. Below are the conditions that we have proposed, please take a look." Qin Guang waved his hand, and Zhou Jingxi was responsible for distributing the information. Qin Guang's new revised conditions were similar to what he and Prince had proposed before, but there was no extremely targeted signing bonus. However, the requirements for the target institution to strengthen their research and development capabilities within 3 months were very harsh. In addition, Qin Guang directly changed the ratio of intellectual property held by both parties to a crazy 30-70 ratio for the photocatalyst patents that were produced by the two parties later on. Qin Guang 70% and the others 30%. This kind of request was simply asking for someone's life, but Qin Guang did not intend to negotiate today. He only wanted to set a sky-high price and let others pay on the spot. On the other hand, it was impossible for the other institutions to agree today. At least he had to leave enough time for Prince, who was inexplicably absent, to respond. Of course, not only did Qin Guang put shackles on others, he even personally wrote the other 4 molecular formulas on the blackboard behind him, and allowed others to take photos and bring them back to their own teams for research. Qin Guang could not only give others ridiculous conditions, but he also appropriately gave enough benefits so that they would not feel that the 30-70 ratio was completely unreasonable. He showed his sincerity and strength. Under the premise of such a crushing technological lead, even if it was 30-70, others would still benefit from it. We really do have 5 formulas, not just one. About half an hour later, the heads of the institutions left one after another with different expressions. No one tried to further negotiate with Qin Guang during the meeting, not even trying to bargain. Everyone had to take this specific request back to the headquarters to discuss it in a high-level meeting. The headquarters experts would speculate on Qin Guang's real intentions, and then propose a negotiation strategy to deal with Qin Guang's harsh conditions. Moreover, the next step of the negotiation must be avoided today's situation where everyone was gathered together, which would make them extremely passive. It was best to communicate privately and then negotiate with both parties instead of competing with each other. This was a revolutionary technological achievement, and it would be too ridiculous to make it into an auction. After everyone left, Zhou Xian stretched her waist and rolled her eyes at Qin Guang. "Is there anyone who teases a Korean like you? I thought for a long time before I thought of the next sentence of your 3 sentences. Aren't you making things difficult for me?" Qin Guang snorted coldly. It's already good enough that he didn't sing the national anthem. Then he sighed again, holding the information from the University of California's Alamo laboratory in his hand. He said regretfully, "Alamo's overall strength is stronger than Prince's, but it's a pity that it's slightly weaker in the field of photocatalysis. There are more political factors in this, so after comparing, Prince is still the most suitable." Zhou Xian also said, "Lincoln Laboratory is in a similar situation. Let's go back to sleep first," Qin Guang said as he reached out to hug Zhou Xian's waist. Zhou Xian dodged like a loach. "In your dreams. Prince's people will be here tomorrow morning. I'm not going to go crazy with you." Qin Guang was puzzled. "How do you know?" Zhou Xian looked at Qin Guang with a strange expression. "Just now, my former subordinate from Prince's laboratory sent me a message saying that Dr. Wurzman was just tied up and sent back to the laboratory." Qin Guang was speechless. That night, Qin Guang did not manage to accomplish anything. Zhou Xian was determined not to give him a chance. On the other hand, Prince, who had learned his lesson, did not even have to wait for the next morning. At 3 o'clock in the morning that night, Wurzman brought the entire negotiation team and checked into the hotel where Qin Guang was staying. Wurzman's room was right next to Fong Tianyu's room, which was next to Qin Guang's. Other than that, Qin Guang, whose ears were extremely sharp, could clearly hear the sound of steady and long breathing coming from the corridor. Not only did Dr. Wurzman bring a technical team and a negotiation team, but as a local tyrant he even brought along a team of bodyguards. They did not go anywhere, they just guarded the corridor and did not sleep. They guaranteed that when Qin Guang opened the door tomorrow morning, he would see Wurzman's wrinkled face. "Spicy chicken shredded. Waseda, Lincoln, Alamo, Cambridge and Xianxia, all of you are messing with me. If I don't show some strength, you all will think that Prince is a local tyrant for nothing." Wurzman's trip this time was a military order to Bravo. If the negotiation failed, his photocatalyst project team would be gone next year. Stop researching photocatalysis, go research genetically modified potatoes. Chapter 1106. However, the sad Wurzman couldn't find Qin Guang the next morning. The world's #1 martial artist wasn't someone you could find just because you wanted to. If he didn't want to see you, you wouldn't be able to find him. Qin Guang quietly left through the window. He only had one purpose, which was to continue to ignore Prince. There was no special reason, he just wanted to do it. Princes Bravo and Wurtzman were anxious. The calmer Qin Guang appeared, the more panicked they became. Qin Guang continued to leak the 4 formulas yesterday, and this matter should have already reached Prince's ears by now. They must be feeling wronged. Wronged why Qin Guang only wrote one to Prince. Wronged why Qin Guang kept ignoring them. Although both sides had some conflicts in the past, business was business. Scientific research was also business. Why did they have to be so stiff? Qin Guang felt like Bravo was regretting his decision. Friend, if you knew this was going to happen, why did you do it? I was in your conference room the day before yesterday, and I sincerely proposed cooperation. You were the one who rejected me first. If you want to find me again, of course, it won't be the same price as before. In fact, Qin Guang could talk to Wurtzman at any time. However, if he ignored Wurtzman for the whole morning, it would not only make him feel better, but it would also make Wurtzman more anxious. Maybe he would be able to get more benefits from the negotiation table. Why not? This was the advantage of technology. Prince didn't understand this before. They didn't have the qualifications to negotiate with Qin Guang at all. After they found out that all the competitors in the photocatalysis field were coming to Princeton like locusts, they completely lost their composure. They could even foresee the future that Qin Guang outlined for them. Losing Qin Guang was equivalent to losing the limitless future of the photocatalysis field. Just like how Intel and agricultural companies monopolized the computer CPU market, latecomers could only eat dust even if they tried their best. The poor Wurtzman did not know that Qin Guang had already left. At 8:30 a.m., Zhou Jingxi opened the door while rubbing her sleepy eyes. She saw her once arrogant former boss, the real authority, Dr. Wurtzman, standing at the door with a fawning expression. Dr. Zhou, are you up? I've asked someone to prepare breakfast in the restaurant. May I invite Mr. Qin to have breakfast with us? Poor old Dr. Wurtzman, a man of comparatively pure scholarship, it was hard on him to put on such an obsequious show. He deserved it. Previously, in front of Qin Guang and Zhou Jingxi, he kept on saying, "You Chinese are so and 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 so." Now, in the end, he still had to beg the Wuxia people that he hated and distrusted the most. Zhou Jingxi did not come back to her senses at first, and Wurtzman was caught off guard. The team of bodyguards that Wurtzman brought slowly surrounded them, but Auntie Mei, who had appeared out of nowhere, stood behind Zhou Jingxi like a ghost. Being stared at by Auntie Mei's cold eyes, the bodyguards subconsciously did not dare to move an inch. The other 3 Wuxia official soldiers also approached silently. Their faces were stern and intimidating. In terms of actual combat ability, this group of bodyguards who were paid US dollars were no match for the elites of the Wuxia military, not to mention Auntie Mei, who could take on 100 people. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little tense, Zhou Jingxi quickly said, "Mr. Wurtzman, why are you here so early in the morning?" Wurtzman felt that she was mocking him, but there was nothing he could do. He scratched his head and said, "Dr. Zhou, I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to meet you and Mr. Qin if I came late." Zhou Jingxi looked down at her phone and saw that it was a text message from Qin Guang before he left. Then she shrugged helplessly and said, "Mr. Wurtzman, you still miss Qin Guang. He left at dawn." Wurtzman exclaimed, "How is that possible? I had people guard the door. I didn't see him come out." Zhou Jingxi placed her phone in front of Wurtzman. Qin Guang had already expected this, and the text message was even written in English. "I don't know why, but I suddenly don't like this window. I really want to jump down from it. I'm going out to do something. I'll be back later." Wurtzman felt a little uncomfortable. "You're crazy. Did the window offend you?" "Hey, Mr. Wurtzman, I'm really sorry. I don't know what's going on in his head." Wurtzman's old face scrunched up, and his facial features were almost unrecognizable. "Dr. Zhou, shall we go for breakfast?" Zhou Jingxi sighed. "Dr. Wurtzman, I know what you're trying to do. We talked to people from other organizations yesterday. But this matter can only be decided by Qin Guang. If he's not here, nothing I say will matter." "But aren't you the developer? Don't you have any say in this?" Wurtzman expressed his disbelief. Zhou Jingxi smiled. "If I told you that he's my real teacher, you definitely wouldn't believe me. But it's true that I have no say in this matter. I don't even have the right to make suggestions." Zhou Jingxi used the Chinese Tai Chi fist to push the blame to other people. Of course she had the right to decide. If she insisted, Qin Guang would not object to her giving the patent away. But now she had to cooperate with Qin Guang and put on an act. Zhou Xian also felt the thrill of revenge in her heart. She had made things difficult for Wurzman when she was working at Prince, and the day before yesterday Wurzman had also been very rude to her. This is karma for you, the great Dr. Wurzman. When it was noon, Qin Guang whistled as he slowly walked back. He went to many places in the morning. First, he disguised himself and went to the Eaton Manor. He still looked the same as before. There was some bad news. His main competitors, William Jones, Ben Affleck, and several other leading actors of the Olympic Games, all came to Princeton. They shamelessly moved into the Eaton Manor. But there was also good news. Mr. James Watson, who he had painstakingly recruited in the American Film Association, did not go back on his word. That morning he took 2 or 3 other old men and left Eaton Manor like thieves. Then they quietly snuck into Princeton cinemas like 007. Old James tried his best. Even though it was his second or third time watching women, he was still deeply immersed in it. However, he had to grit his teeth and support his old friend, who was also immersed in the film, by his side. In order to keep it a secret, he didn't even ask Irma to help. He was relying on his old bones. Compared to the other people in the Film Association, James was obviously a purer person. In the beginning he believed in other people's slander, and subconsciously resisted Qin Guang. However, after Irma pulled some strings and personally went to the cinema, he went back and read the first volume of World Faction that Irma gave him. He immediately came to his senses and became Qin Guang's water supply. He decisively began to help Qin Guang build connections. The reason was that James Watson was more simple-minded than the other members of the Film Association. Everything he did was for the sake of the film, not his personal interests. When Qin Guang's silhouette appeared in the hotel, Wurzman, who had been waiting outside, immediately noticed it and charged down with his men. Qin Guang was waiting for the elevator. When the elevator door opened, Wurzman walked up to him with a stiff smile on his face. "Mr. Qin, you're back? We've been waiting for you for a long time." As Wurzman spoke, he tried to shake Qin Guang's hand. Qin Guang quietly dodged and put his hands behind his back. He looked at him warily. "Who are you?" Wurzman's smile froze on his face. "Mr. Qin, please don't joke around." "Who's joking with you? Who are you? Get out of the way." Wurzman felt a headache coming on. "It's me, Dr. Wurzman from Prince. Didn't we just meet a few days ago?" Qin Guang acted as if he had a sudden realization. "You're the Dr. Wurzman who said that Chinese people are used to being thieves?" Wurzman almost vomited blood on the spot. "Can you not be so narrow-minded?" "No, I didn't say anything like that, Mr. Qin. I'm here to talk business on behalf of Prince. I'm very sincere, unprecedentedly sincere." Qin Guang didn't want to talk nonsense with him. Instead he put on a straight face. "Is that so? Sincere? Why didn't I feel it?" Wurzman's hands trembled. His face turned from white to red and then from red to black. He was, after all, an absolute authority in the field of photocatalysis and even in the field of materials science. Today he had endured it again and again, and now he was about to explode. Qin Guang was expressionless. He even decided in his heart that if Wurzman continued to act tough, he would really sentence Prince to death. Your so-called sincerity isn't just coming over here and smiling apologetically. Your apologetic smile isn't even on the point of the problem. I've already pointed it out for you, but you're still acting dumb. You don't even know how to act. What kind of sincerity is that? After a long while, Wurzman finally forced himself to calm down and lowered his noble head. All right. Mr. Qin, I'd like to formally apologize to you for the inappropriate remarks I made about Chinese people a few days ago. Qin Guang tilted his head. You don't seem to be very willing? Then what if I tell you that I think white people are arrogant and rude? White people's civilization is a civilization of destruction and plunder, while our Chinese civilization is a civilization of construction and creation. China's current backwardness is only temporary. Sooner or later, white people will become second-class citizens. Are you willing to accept that? Wurzman's face fell. Qin Guang shrugged. Look at your situation. There's an old saying in China, do unto others what you don't want others to do unto you. To put it bluntly, it means that if you don't like something, don't force it on others. Wurzman replied in a low, muffled voice, Mr. Qin, I understand. Qin Guang saw that it was about time and felt that he had enough. He waved his hand and said, "Let's go up and talk about the contract." Chapter 1107. Half an hour later, Qin Guang called Pizarro. Prince's head Dr. Bravo was also present. The negotiation between the two parties proceeded much faster than with other organizations. After all, Qin Guang and Zhou Xian knew Prince's situation inside out. After Prince's death experience, he knew the consequences, so he behaved much more obediently. At 1:30 in the afternoon, the two parties quickly reached an agreement. They signed, stamped their seals and took photos. There was no press conference. In the end, the contract signed by the two parties was harsher than Qin Guang's initial proposal. Prince took the initiative to increase the signing fee to $30 million. More losses in the future would be wiped out. With Prince's current wealth, he didn't care about the additional tens of millions. In addition, the two parties also clarified the technical difficulties that Prince had to reach in the next step of the cooperation to consult Qin Guang. "You can't ask me a question like how much is 1 + 1. I'm not Goldbach." Of course, as Prince, they didn't want to rely on Qin Guang and Zhou Xian for nothing. This was because Qin Guang forcibly increased the intellectual property ownership of the two parties to a 60-40 ratio. Qin Guang had 60% and Prince had 40%. Almost all the research costs of the intellectual property created under this situation were borne by Prince. It was likely that for Qin Guang, it was as simple as a few words or a few pages of calculations. But according to the contract between the two parties, as long as Qin Guang participated in a specific project, Prince had to pay the price. At that time, there would be separate contracts for each specific project. This was the benefit of a technological lead in monopoly. Just like how each iPhone could bring hundreds of dollars of profit to Apple, but the OEM responsible for the assembly would only make a few dollars of profit. After finally signing the agreement, Bravo and Waltzman were both happy and worried. He was happy that he had finally settled this troublesome matter. Regardless of whether he was happy or not, at least he was on board now. With this layer of relationship, he could repair it in the future and further strengthen Prince's current facilities and equipment advantages in the field of photocatalysis. In the future, Prince would always be able to continue to benefit from it, and the previous billions of dollars of investment would not go to waste. They were worried that they tried to ask for an exclusive agreement but were rejected by Qin Guang. His words were very gentle, but if one were to simply refine them, they could roughly be summarized into these 6 words of mantra. "Sign if you want, get out." What could Bravo and the others do? They were angry, but they still had to smile. But Prince's men were quick to rejoice. At this moment, Cambridge, Rockefeller, Lincoln Laboratory and Alamo Laboratory were all discussing how ridiculous Qin Guang's conditions were and how unacceptable they were. They were trying to figure out how to bargain. In the end, bad news suddenly came from the other side, like a bolt from the blue. Prince's laboratory, which was blocked from the public meeting yesterday, finally took the initiative to negotiate with Qin Guang. They took the initiative to accept Qin Guang's harsh conditions. Now they were one step ahead. The people in charge of the major scientific research institutions in Princeton almost fainted on the spot, but they quickly recovered because Qin Guang released news. They didn't sign an exclusive agreement with Prince's laboratory. This meant that everyone still had a chance. Therefore, in the next few days, the major scientific research institutions that refused to give up took the initiative to go to the door. They didn't care whether they were passive or not, they just wanted to settle this matter. It didn't matter if they didn't have an exclusive agreement, at least they couldn't fall behind. Unfortunately, as the latecomers, they had to face more stringent conditions than Qin Guang's. This was understandable. After all, Qin Guang signed a contract with them for free. In addition, they were more or less behind Prince's laboratory in terms of hard and soft conditions. In the next step of technical cooperation, they were indeed more dependent on Qin Guang than Prince. This time, Qin Guang really did not have to do anything. He only gave a general scope and threw all the specific matters to Zhou Xian. Fortunately, Fang Tianyu was there to help. In terms of legal counsel, Pizarro also officially signed a contract with Tianguang Group on behalf of the Baker law firm, becoming an official consultant for Qin Guang's Tianguang Group in North America. After a few days of negotiation, other than the most miserable Wuxia and Xianxia Group, the other scientific research institutions signed contracts with slight differences in details. The weakest research institution would have to face the most stringent contracts. In short, they would lose their rights and humiliate the country. For those who were slightly stronger, it was 6. 5-3. 5. Alamo and Lincoln on the other hand got 6. 2 points and 3. 8 points which were envied by others. Prince's laboratory, who was originally wronged, heard that other people signed contracts worse than them, but they were still the happiest. Bravo and Woltzman immediately calmed down. As long as there are people worse off than us, we are happy. But they would have a headache later because Qin Guang had already communicated with the Wuxia Scientific Research Institute over the phone and reached a verbal agreement. The contract Qin Guang was going to sign with the Wuxia Scientific Research Institute was also a 3-7, but it was Qin Guang taking 30% and the Wuxia Scientific Research Institute taking 70%. Qin Guang had no choice. In front of his own people he was just that honest. He knew a little about the business rules, but he didn't particularly care. Anyway, he was certain that he couldn't lose out. The most important thing was to be happy. I'm happy, I'm willing, that's all. At that time Qin Guang only confirmed one thing with Zhou Xian. Through his personal connections he helped Hua Ling and Zhong Yu buy plane tickets from Beijing to New Jersey as quickly as possible to help Zhou Xian. He wanted to use the resources of the laboratory to complete the production of the 5 god-level formulas as quickly as possible. In addition, Qin Guang also chatted with Auntie Mei for a while and gave her some pointers on martial arts. After all, he was the sect master of one of the 27 sects, the Rose Flower sect. Although it was an arrangement from the headquarters, Qin Guang still had to express his gratitude to Zhou Xian, despite being an ex-director of the Rose Flower sect. Aunt Mei was naturally overjoyed. Although she was already at the pinnacle of the skin energy realm, there was still someone stronger than her, like Wen, who was in the literature grandmaster realm. There was also Qin Guang, who was said to have surpassed ordinary martial artists. Who didn't want to become stronger? Qin Guang had learned 400,000 unique techniques in the realm of true martial and finally combined them into the self-named True Martial Divine Technique. He could be considered a living martial arts encyclopedia. In just a few words, Qin Guang had answered many of the questions that Auntie Mei had hidden in her heart for many years. Every time Qin Guang enlightened her, Auntie Mei would think hard for a long time and then be suddenly enlightened. The two of them chatted for about an hour. The spirit, energy, and spirit in Aunt Mei's eyes became much more condensed, and the aura that she exposed to the outside also became more restrained. She actually showed signs of returning to the original state. Thank you, Director. It's very beneficial to me. I will never forget Director Bureau Chief's great kindness. Auntie Mei said with a slightly emotional tone. Qin Guang put his hands behind his back like a master. Auntie Mei, you don't have to thank me. It's also because you have been stuck at the peak of Peijing for too long. I just happened to be here and answered some of your questions. If it was a martial artist at the level of Bonjing, it would be useless no matter how much I gave her. Auntie Mei said, it's easy to say that it's good to have a good foundation, but the most difficult thing is the opportunity at the most critical point. In the whole world only you can do it, Director. Qin Guang felt very comfortable. Auntie Mei, you're too kind. Zhou Xian came downstairs and was about to go out again. Auntie Mei said, then I'll go protect Miss Shua again. Qin Guang said, wait a minute. Auntie Mei turned around and was puzzled. What else does Director want? Qin Guang waved his hand. Nothing. I just forgot. Let's talk about it next time. After Auntie Mei walked far away, Qin Guang confirmed again and again. He thought to himself, I heard that Auntie Mei is not young anymore. Are the teeth in her mouth fake? Recently Qin Guang had become a lot more cunning. He was actually doubting what Auntie Mei said about never forgetting. For Qin Guang, the biggest news came from the other side. After waiting in boredom for 4 whole days, there was finally good news from Eaton Manor. The big shots from the American Film Association had been on a vacation in the Eaton Manor for 10 days. They had done enough work, but Qin Guang was still in Princeton, which made them feel like they were sitting on pins and needles. After some deliberation, they decided that it was about time for them to officially go home. They didn't achieve their original goal of hiding. They didn't know how their whereabouts were exposed, but Qin Guang followed them, which was a pain in the ass. Now that their goal was completely ruined, they might as well go home. Of course, they also thought that it might be a bad coincidence. After all, Qin Guang went to the district court on the second day he came to Princeton and caused something big. This made many senior judges of the Film Association confused. They thought that Qin Guang might have come to Princeton to deal with the photocatalysis issue that had been going on for the past 2 days. Because of this, they scolded President Fred, who decided to come to the Eaton Manor. "Look at the place you chose. You could have just found a farmhouse near Los Angeles to hide. We're so unlucky that we won the first prize in the lottery, only to find that the lottery ticket was soiled in our pocket." In the end, they set the evacuation time for the day after tomorrow. They even booked the plane tickets. At the same time, in the past few days, the persistent old James had developed nearly 30 like-minded comrades among the 100 or so Oscar judges who came with him. He had become an underground worker who had infiltrated the Oscar committee. After all, there were still people who were righteous. Old James had infiltrated his friends, and everyone had similar ideas. After discovering the great contribution that Qin Guang had made to the film industry, these nearly 30 people each had 2 copies of World Faction, and became Qin Guang's secret fans. Half of them were not personally influenced by old James. Instead, they were influenced by people who were influenced by old James like a virus. It was funny that they wanted to buy World Faction, but they didn't want others to find out. They always had a special reason. They would either go out in person or have their entourage go out. Then they would go to bookstores or newsstands like thieves, or they would go to Amazon to buy the book. Because the biggest characteristic of this group of people was that each of them had 2 copies of World Faction, they secretly gave their underground organization a name, the World Party. At 2:30 in the morning, in the underground fallout shelter of the Eaton Manor, the 29 members of the World Party were holding an emergency meeting. "Mr. Watson, what should we do now? Should we wait for everyone to go home and think of a way to bring Qin Guang to visit them?" "No, that's not good. People will think that we've been bought by Qin Guang with dollars. They will also be on guard against us like thieves. Then what should we do? Fred and the others are deeply prejudiced against Qin Guang. They all have their own interests in mind. We have to take drastic measures. Mr. Watson, how do we use strong medicine? We have to create a public opportunity for Qin Guang to show his talent in front of everyone and convince them. That way they will have no choice but to put aside their interests and we won't be criticized." "How is that possible? There are more than 80 people. They don't really love movies." "Friends, have you forgotten the other actors and women? Have you forgotten the theory of World Faction? We will all be dragged into the movie through the screen. If Qin Guang shows his artistic talent in front of all of us, then I think everyone will be dragged into his world of acting." The first batch of members of the World Party fell silent. They felt that James Watson's judgment was reasonable and well-founded. "Then let's do it. The day after tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" "That's right, tomorrow. Let's hurry up and set up the stage outside the gates of the Eaton Manor tomorrow." James Watson stood up agitatedly and said, "I'll get Qin Guang to prepare now. Let's perform Romeo and Juliet." "Good. That's right. Just like how he performed Thunderstorm in front of the Chinese, Shakespeare's plays can best showcase his abilities." Old James looked at his comrades and clenched his fists. "Brothers, let's do it. For the movie. For the arts." Everyone raised their arms in unison, then lowered their voices and spoke excitedly. "For the movie. For the arts." When Qin Guang received the call from old James, it was already past 3 in the morning. However, he instantly regained his senses and was in high spirits. Old James was worried that he would not be able to memorize the script of Romeo and Juliet in time, but Qin Guang had no problem with it. Back when he was learning acting, he had even self-destructed once for this movie. He could recite it backwards. Chapter 1108. Qin Guang didn't expect old James to help him to this extent. He heard that they were even planning to pay for the construction of the stage and props out of their own pockets. Qin Guang didn't agree immediately. The old man had so much money that he didn't know how to spend it. He even ordered 2 bowls of porridge for breakfast, one for drinking and the other for pouring. How could he let them pay for it? He firmly disagreed, saying that he couldn't let them pay for it. It was an insult to his American dollars. He could hear his wallet crying. It was being looked down upon. He also said that if they decided to do the stage play today, they would start work tomorrow. Although the stage setting could be simplified, it was in such a hurry. The costumes and props would definitely cost a lot. "I'm short of everything but money." He was so persistent. Old James also heard about him knocking on Prince's lab during the day, so he didn't insist and agreed to his request. "Right, the stage, costumes and props are easy. I know the most classic version of the stage play like the back of my hand, but am I going to act alone?" Qin Guang thought about the role again. Old James said proudly, "Don't worry. Although my granddaughter Irma isn't famous and is just a fledgling movie actress, I can assure you that she is one of the best stage actors in the United States. But I can assure you that she is one of the best stage actors in the United States. Her graduation gift from the Watson family was Romeo and Juliet. Otherwise, we wouldn't have agreed to let her quit her job as a lawyer and become an actress." Irma's face appeared in Qin Guang's mind. She wasn't stunning, but her temperament was very compatible. She had the air of a noble lady, and her appearance was relatively pure and beautiful. It was very much in line with Juliet's character. "All right, thank you, Mr. Watson. Does Irma remember the script?" "You're welcome. I'll call her right away. She has a good memory and has practiced Romeo and Juliet more than once." "No problem, she's the most professional. Thank you very much, thank you very much. See you tomorrow." In the end, Qin Guang managed to restrain himself. Just now he almost asked old James if he could add a little more passion. The next morning, the 29 members of the World Party walked out of their rooms one after another with dark circles under their eyes. At first, when they met non-gay members of the Film Society, it was awkward and awkward. "Hey Mr. Damon, what happened to you? Did you have a nightmare last night?" "It's fine. This year's nomination round is about to start. I watched a few films recommended to me by my friend last night and accidentally forgot the time." "Mr. Damon, you are so dedicated. We plan to go to President Fred's house in a few days to watch it together in the small screening room. If we concentrate on watching, I'm afraid we won't be able to keep up with our old age." "Us. It's me and my wife. I don't care about others." Similar conversations took place in every corner of the castle villa. Some sharp-witted people could sense that something must have happened last night, but old James and the others were tight-lipped and determined not to tell anyone. The members of the World Party that old James had roped in were the real veterans of the association. Although they were old and most of them did not participate in the actual management of the association, their reputation and prestige were still there. They also had students all over the world in the industry and had a resounding reputation. They had given real power to young and vigorous people like Fred, but their influence had never weakened. To put it nicely, these people were veterans of old authority. To put it bluntly, they were a gang of old hooligans that others could not afford to offend. Although everyone knew that this group of old seniors with dark circles under their eyes must have done something last night, no one dared to interrogate them if they did not take the initiative to say it. At 9 o'clock in the morning, a shocking theatrical troupe suddenly appeared opposite the castle villa, followed by a particularly professional stage planning team. Everyone in the castle villa was confused and did not understand what was going on. They discussed that a few people should go out and take a look. Old James, who had a guilty conscience, decisively volunteered to go out with a few old men. He patted his chest and said, "Let's go and ask about the situation." They were indeed veterans of the film industry. Old James himself was a retired director, and the other 3 old men also had an old director, an old movie actor, and an old stage actor. They were clearly lying through their teeth with dark circles under their eyes, but their acting was flawless. The younger and vigorous people in the Film Association could not see any clues at all. They knew that there was definitely something wrong, but from the micro-expressions on old James and the others' faces, these industry veterans could not see any reason to suspect them. "I really didn't expect that I, Damon, would be able to improve my acting skills by leaps and bounds in just a few days, even though I'm almost 70 years old. I'm a little regretful. I just said I'd stop acting last year, but now I want to act. Damon, this is all thanks to the world's performing arts. Didn't you see Malfoy and Fred fooling us silly? Mr. Watson, we really have to thank Mr. Chen later." Old James, who was leading the group out of the castle, still had an angry expression on his face. However, he said, "Shoo, keep your voice down. We're not done yet. If someone hears us, we'll be in trouble." After walking out of the castle, old James arrogantly grabbed the head of the troupe and scolded him. However, the person who had called the head of the troupe last night was actually him. The head of the troupe also had a fawning look on his face as he explained everything. After a long time, old James walked back with a satisfied smile on his face. Fred and the others, who were standing by the window on the 3rd floor of the villa, saw this scene clearly. Mr. Watson and the others really aren't playing tricks? President Fred, what are you thinking? What could the old president be up to? After waiting for 2 minutes, old James and the others went upstairs with smiles on their faces. Old James said with a smile. Fred, the person leading the other side is Powell Kennan's student, Ginter Cameron. He's the head of the Princeton drama troupe. President Fred nodded respectfully and said, Old President, you've worked hard. I know Ginter Cameron's name, but this is the first time I've seen him. What is he doing? It's not a big deal. Ginter Cameron heard that we're leaving tomorrow and has been very regretful that he hasn't officially visited us these past few days. He feels very bad about it. There were some very special reasons before. Everyone knows that Ginter knows that we don't really want to go out, but now it seems that things have changed. Recently, Qin Guang's attention has been switched to that strange photocatalyst thing. He's been having a big fight with Prince's laboratory. Ginter thinks that we shouldn't be so afraid, so... A member of the World Party behind Fred, who also had dark circles under his eyes, angrily interrupted Old James. Old James, what are you talking about? When have we ever been afraid of the Chinese? If you want to be afraid, you should be afraid. I, Foreman, have never been afraid of anyone. Idiot. Coward. Old James cursed in his heart. This shameless old foreman must be taking advantage of him verbally. Of course, he could also be too immersed in his role. Hey, Foreman. I know you're the bravest person. You're as brave as a boxer. I especially like the way you look in your navy blue boxers. Old James was mocking the way Foreman looked when Qin Guang came to the castle for the first time a few days ago. Foreman was only wearing a pair of blue boxer briefs and curled up in the shelter. Old Foreman's pale face instantly turned red. Old James, do you want to get beaten up? I'll let you have a taste of my fist. As he spoke, he was about to rush forward, looking like he couldn't restrain his anger. Old James was also a hot-tempered person in the past. He was not a kind person. He rolled up his sleeves and rushed forward. Come on. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Fred, Damon, Malfoy and the others spent a lot of effort to pull these two angry old lions down. They were all sweating from exhaustion. Foreman, who hadn't been able to show off his boxing skills, left in a huff. Old James tidied up his appearance while explaining to Fred. It turned out that in order to express his respect for the Motion Picture Association, Gene Cameron had meticulously prepared a classic stage play, Romeo and Juliet. He had been preparing for this a few days in advance. He had planned to send out a public invitation after everything was ready, but he didn't expect them to leave so soon. That was why he hurriedly brought people to set up the stage early in the morning. He was ready to start in the evening at the latest. After listening to Old James, Fred muttered, So that's how it is? Old James nodded. Of course. Everyone knew that we didn't dare to go out, and it wasn't convenient for them to ask us directly. So, Gene Cameron decided to build a stage opposite our villa building. We only need to walk out of the villa. Malfoy Bentler, who was next to him, said, That's perfect. We can advertise to the public that in addition to coming to Princeton for a vacation, our other purpose is to participate in the stage play that Gene Cameron prepared for us. It's been many years since someone performed Shakespeare's classics in public. It suits our identity. Old James was very satisfied with Malfoy's cooperation. He continued, That's true. Although everyone knows we can't really let people think that we're afraid of the Chinese. We need a way out. Fred still felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't see through it. Plus, he couldn't question Old James in public. Didn't you see that he and Old Foreman almost fight? Say, maybe it's all my fault. If I hadn't chosen Princeton as the location for my vacation, none of this would have happened. Fred silently blamed himself. All right, I'll call King Cameron and thank him. I'll also ask him to thank Mr. Keenan for not being able to come. The farce of Old James and Foreman almost getting into a fight seriously interfered with Fred's judgment. His originally suspicious mind was blinded, and he really thought that Gordon Cameron was so kind as to prepare a surprise for everyone. Chapter 1109. Outside at 9:15 in the morning, Captain Gold called the stage construction team to start work. The noise was so loud that the ears of the people in the villa hurt. However, they did not feel uncomfortable. Instead, they were even more excited about Gold Cameron's enthusiasm. Qin Guang threw out a lot of US dollars like snowflakes. Gold Cameron did not bring a team at all. Instead, it was the elite teams of several exhibition companies in Princeton. Under the unified management of Gold Cameron, these teams worked together in an orderly manner. They were each responsible for different parts of the stage, clothing and so on. The progress was extremely fast. In the past, People used to say that the Chinese were efficient in construction and laughed at the Europeans and Americans for being inefficient. However, today's reality proved that this was a fallacy. There was only one reason for inefficiency, and that was not enough money. When the weight of US dollars was enough to make a man crawl out of his wife's belly, all problems were not problems. In just a few hours, opposite the castle villa, a luxurious stage tailored for Romeo and Juliet appeared out of thin air. It was built faster than the ancient city of Rome, which was built in 7 days. Although it was not as exquisite as the modern, high-tech and luxurious stage that others had formerly prepared for several months, it was definitely above the standard in terms of the stage scenery, lighting effects, basic moving background and so on. It was not far from the famous musical version of Romeo et Julie that was held in Paris, France on February 14, 2000, starring Damien Sugg and Cecilia Cara. It had to be said that this was due to the rapid advancement of science and technology in the past decade or so since 2000. For example, the combination equivalence, which was extremely difficult to achieve in the past, could now be achieved with a high-quality and expensive LED nano spotlight. In the past, the extremely cumbersome layout of the background panel when switching scenes could now be completed with a high-resolution OLED large screen. As for the digital special effects or real scenes that needed to be played on the background screen, with the double effect of US dollars and connections, Gold Cameron directly contacted the copyright holder of the Paris version of Romeo and Juliet, and bought the audio and video copyrights that they left behind. When the time came, he could directly project it on his big screen. As for the background music, he had also used countless connections to combine the most classic copyrights of all the major copyrights, and then randomly selected and combined them. This sudden appearance seemed simple, but in fact, it was the perfect embodiment of contemporary action. Its true cost was as high as nearly 10 million US dollars. But to Qin Guang, this wasn't a problem at all. For the sake of being a god in the world of acting, for the sake of survival, no matter how much money he had, he would not even blink. In any case, it was extorted from the head of Prince's laboratory, so he didn't feel any heartache spending it. In fact, it felt especially good, as if he was spending someone else's money. Although it was actually his, it came too easily. He felt as if he had reaped something without sowing. It was even easier than buying a lottery ticket. In addition, during the construction of the stage, related news quickly appeared on social networks in Europe and the United States. Shakespeare's classics. A gift from the Princeton Repertory Company. The Oscar judges go to Princeton to watch Shakespeare's play, last break before their busy daytimeless classics, Romeo and Juliet. Who on earth has the guts to perform Shakespeare's classic play in front of the Oscar judges? All kinds of news articles appeared on the internet in the morning like a crazy virus. Obviously, this was just a trivial matter, but it inexplicably received unprecedented attention in one day. This was very strange. Even though the guests of the stage were almost more than 90% of the American Film Association, even though the performance was Shakespeare's play Romeo and Juliet. In fact, even though not many people were willing to admit that traditional Chinese culture was declining, in the mainstream of today's European and American youth, Romeo and Juliet was still a culture that was out of date, even though not many people were willing to admit it. Simply put, it was Odette. Therefore, this matter should not have caused such a sensation. People with intentions and insiders knew that there must be other forces behind it. Even the members of the Oscar committee in the castle building felt that something was wrong, but they didn't have any solid evidence. Every time they started to question it, some senior members of the World Party would jump out and use all kinds of tricks to interfere with their line of sight and their thoughts. At the same time, these veteran members of the World Party also used their own social media accounts to promote King Cameron's Shakespeare play. They even let many of their students and juniors promote it. They also took credit for the storm on the internet. Look, we all said this and so reposted my post. Isn't it normal for it to become popular? Do you think we're getting old? That we are outdated? That we have no influence, that our words do not matter? Fred and the rest of the younger generation had no way of dealing with these old men and women. They had no choice but to believe them. King Cameron picked up a big bargain. His Princeton Repertory Theater had received a lot of fees, but money was not a big deal. Through this matter, he successfully made old James and the other veteran members of the American Film Association owe him a favor. Most importantly, his repertory theater inexplicably became popular. Thinking of Irma Watson, who was rehearsing with many leading actors in the Princeton Theater, King Cameron's heart was filled with joy. Others might not be familiar with Irma, but as a veteran theater director, King Cameron knew very well that Irma was definitely one of the most talented and best female theater actors in the United States. However, there was one thing that particularly confused him. Old James specifically emphasized to him that the other members of the team would directly use the ready-made members of his repertory theater. However, for the male lead who played Romeo, Old James specifically told him to make it clear to the male actor that he was only a temporary candidate to assist in the rehearsals. When it was time to actually go on stage, there would be someone else. This had to be said in advance to avoid any complications. In addition, Old James also made it clear to King Cameron that the young actor must also be kept a secret. King Cameron heard Old James's serious tone and did not dare to be careless. Fortunately, he had always been a man of his word in the repertory theater. Although the young actor was regretful, he did not dare to disobey him. Hearing the seriousness in Old James's voice, Kent Cameron dared not be careless. Fortunately, he had always been a man of his word in the troupe, and although the young actor was sorry, he dared not disobey him. Even Captain Gold himself was at a loss when he was busy. Who would be playing Romeo? What was old Watson up to? Forget it, this is not something I should be concerned about. However, at this time, among the people rehearsing in the Princeton Theater, only Irma vaguely guessed something. Although Old James did not explicitly say it to her, her intuition told her that Romeo must be played by Qin Guang. Although Old James did not explicitly say it to her, her intuition told her that Romeo must be played by Qin Guang. After the triple baptism of Woman, World's Pie, and 1900, Irma Watson had long become a crazy fan of Qin Guang. If Qin Guang had been recognized as a god in the acting world, Irma would have instantly upgraded from a crazy fan to a true fanatic. When Irma thought about how he would be on the same stage as Qin Guang in the evening, he couldn't help but feel a little overwhelmed. "Miss Irma, you're using too much force." The chief director, who had been pulled in at the last minute, immediately noticed the problem and reminded her loudly. Irma waved her hand apologetically. "Sorry, let's start again." More and more reporters came to Eaton Manor. No matter how strange the situation was, since Romeo and Zhou was already a hit, and the big shots of the American Film Association were involved, the reporters would naturally be alerted. Apart from that, people from all the major U.S. webcast platforms and TV stations also appeared one after another within a day, looking for Captain Jean Tay to discuss the webcast and TV broadcast. King Cameron wanted to compare the options, but in fact he had no say in the matter. Old James had told him early on that the live broadcast would be handed over to YouTube. If Must Die was interested, they could pay for it together almost free of charge. The live broadcast was handed over to UBC, a cable TV station that was not at the top of the rankings, but could also be watched by all of America. The price was also ridiculously low. King Cameron did not quite understand Old James' purpose. They had spent so much money to complete the preparations in one day. The live broadcast was almost the only way to recoup the funds, but they had given it away for free. They only had one request. They hoped that the other party would match the publicity resources as much as possible so that the stage play, which had been built from scratch in one day, would have a greater impact. In fact, Old James had not thought it through, but Qin Guang's thinking was very simple. Tech companies like YouTube and Must Die had helped him a lot, providing him with timely help. Business was business and favors were favors. He did not know how foreigners did business, but as a Chinese, Qin Guang was well versed in the ways of the world. He had to return the favor. UBC had helped him with the publicity under great pressure. Although they had received a lot of fees, there were many TV stations that went back on their word at the time. Now they were returning the favor. The most important thing was that the lower the fee he charged others, the more money they had to spend on marketing and promotion. By 6 o'clock in the evening, there was a sea of people outside the Castle Villa in Eaton Manor. The small stage was filled with people. In order to reserve seats for the big shots of the American Film Association, King Cameron had even temporarily hired 2 security companies to maintain order on the scene. In addition to the nearly 200 reserved seats, there were all kinds of seats in the surrounding areas. This was an open-air performance, so there was no need to pay for tickets at all. Anyway, the place was only so big. It was first come, first served. The sea of people spread from the bottom of the stage, and even the farthest seats were placed at the entrance of the Castle Villa 50 meters away. There were about 10,000 people, half of whom were locals of Princeton, and the other half were art lovers who had heard about the event today. Some drove, some took a bus, and some flew over from the eastern United States. There were all kinds of reporters with all kinds of cameras, and even people from the top 5 TV stations in the United States were there. Further away there was a live broadcast car with their logo on it. Although these TV stations were not qualified to broadcast the scene on the stage due to copyright reasons, it was not a copyright violation to interview or even broadcast the audience around the open-air performance. Even old James, the mastermind behind the scenes, was shocked by the scene. Fred and the other members of the Film Association who did not know what was going on, felt even more uncertain. Chapter 11:10. President Fred stood by the window and looked down in a daze. Why are there so many people here? Oh my God. Old James coughed softly. Maybe it's because no one has performed Shakespeare's plays in public for a long time? Everyone thinks that Shakespeare is past his prime and always deliberately avoids his works. They even forcibly make things that don't look the same in the pursuit of novelty. In fact, people's desire for classics has been suppressed for a long time, so it was easily reignited. Malfoy Bentler, who was next to him, said, "It's possible, but it's very disadvantageous for Gent Cameron. If his performance in such an influential public performance is mediocre, the impact will be very bad." President Fred nodded. Not only will it be disadvantageous for Gent Cameron, but will also be implicated. After all, this is a show he prepared for us. If he messes up, we'll also become a joke. There was silence in the hall of the huge castle villa. Inexplicably, they had been pushed to the teeth of the storm. At 6:30 in the afternoon, Irma, who had finished her makeup, and the rest of the cast arrived late by bus. At the same time, Qin Guang was sitting in a business car in the corner of the parking lot of Eaton Manor. Old Foreman's granddaughter was touching up his makeup. The 28-year-old girl was a top special effects makeup artist who had risen to fame in the American industry in recent years. Her task was not simple. She had to transform Qin Guang's highly recognizable Asian face into a young European aristocrat, Romeo. Fortunately, she was a professional special effects makeup artist. She had been fine-tuning Qin Guang's face since noon. She had already completed most of the work before coming over. Now she was only making the final adjustments and touching up the makeup. At this moment, Qin Guang's complexion was slightly paler than usual, but not by much. He wore contact lenses in his eyes. His eyes had changed from the deep black of the Wuxia people to the sapphire blue of the Atlantic Ocean. In addition, a little prosthesis had been added to the surface of his nose. It was not a crude prosthesis, but a new type of silicone prosthesis that fit perfectly with the human skin. There were not many prostheses used and they fit perfectly. They only made his nose look a little taller. As for Qin Guang's hair, the girl originally wanted to give him a wig, but Qin Guang asked her to dye his hair a beautiful bright gold. Although everything happened in a hurry, Qin Guang knew that tonight's Romeo and Juliet was extremely important. If he succeeded, his trip to the United States this time would almost achieve 99% of his goals. It was almost equivalent to announcing the official success of the Olympic Games. He seemed cynical, but few people could really understand the importance of this matter to him. But this time his performance conditions were not as good as before. As a Chinese, he had to make up as Romeo and add something to his face, which would more or less affect the effect of his performance. Moreover, this was a live stage play without post-production special effects, which was even more difficult. Everyone knew that a play or stage play was the place that tested an actor's acting skills the most. If there were no NGs, there would be a chance to start again. It was also the closest contact with the audience. Every detail of the performance would fall into the eyes of others. Every flaw in the scene would be infinitely magnified in the hearts of others. That was why so many male idols had acted in countless movies and TV shows, but never dared to walk into a small play theater. Was it because they thought that acting in plays did not pay enough? Of course not. Everyone knew how much reputation one could get from acting in a play. For a professional actor, reputation was almost equivalent to money. They didn't go because they didn't dare to. They couldn't bear the negative impact of bad reviews after acting in an embarrassing way. Although Qin Guang was the greatest performing artist in the history of mankind, what he was doing now was a magnificent feat that had never been done in the history of performing arts. He had been in the industry for less than a year and this was his first time on the big screen, but he was going to fight for the highest award in the world of film art. Perhaps in the opinion of some people in the circle, the Oscar was not the most authoritative award, but in the eyes of ordinary people, no one could deny that the Oscar was the most famous and influential film art award. Therefore, Qin Guang decided to keep improving. He wanted to treat this matter with an unprecedented state, even more serious than when he acted in Women and Thunderstorm. He had to do everything in his power to the best of his ability. Okay, Mr. Qin, it's a success. At first I was really worried that it would look strange, but now it seems that the effect is good. I have to admit one thing. Although you're not a particularly stunning handsome guy, you really look good now. Ah, thank you for the compliment. Your makeup is really good. Clothes make the man. With such a great makeup artist like you, if I still look ugly after makeup, then my life would be too miserable. Foreman's granddaughter looked up and down at Qin Guang with the bright light in the car. She was very satisfied. Qin Guang took the mirror, looked at himself and slightly tilted his head. Yes, very satisfied. He felt a lot younger all of a sudden, just like how handsome Leonardo was when he played Romeo at the age of 21. Bah. I'm only 21 years old. Alas, I've lived too long and my mentality has become old. Time is really scary. Thank you, Miss Evelyn. Say hello to Mr. Foreman Clement for me. Evelyn tilted her head. Mr. Qin, I haven't seen you recite any lines since this afternoon. Is it really okay? Qin Guang smiled and shook his long blonde hair, making Evelyn's face bleed. Evelyn, you have to know that standing in front of you is a great performing artist that has never been seen in this world. Aren't we sitting in the car? Qin Guang waved goodbye to Evelyn and walked towards the stage in a well-ironed suit. This time he didn't have to hide. He almost didn't recognize himself. Now he looked like a standard European and American handsome guy, not much different from Lil Li when he was at the peak of his looks. Qin Guang didn't dare to look in the mirror too much. He was afraid that he would turn gay because of his handsomeness. Jean Tay Cameron was standing at the intersection with 2 or 3 people, looking around nervously. According to his agreement with old James last night, the male lead should be arriving soon. Jean Tay was quite unsure. Now that the matter had blown up, the attention was beyond imagination. This had become a global event. Even if he let the actors of his troupe perform, Jean Tay felt that it was very likely that they wouldn't be able to stop the show. If it was just an average performance, social media would definitely explode tomorrow. When that happened, his Princeton drama troupe would become a laughing stock and be ruthlessly mocked for overestimating themselves. How stupid and ignorant did they have to have the guts to put on such an ordinary play in front of the senior judges of the American Film Association? And it's Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Aren't you afraid that Shakespeare's coffin can't hold it down? Didn't you see the once classic Romeo actor Lil Li post a comment on his social media? Unfortunately, I just got off the plane from New York to London. If there was a shuttle, I would really want to go back to New Jersey immediately. I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of Romeo President Fred and the others will see. I wish the Princeton drama troupe all the best. Is this guy really wishing me well? Isn't he mocking or cursing me? After waiting anxiously for a long time, Jean Tay finally saw a tall and handsome young man walking toward him from afar. He was holding the secret signal that both parties had agreed on. It was a rose that only had a bud left. Hello, sir, you're finally here. It's already crowded over there. Let's hurry and change. Judging from the appearance, Jean Tay felt a little more at ease. This young man looked quite handsome and his walking posture was also very proper. It was obvious that he was from a noble family and had a good upbringing. Oh. Thank you, Mr. Cameron. You've worked hard today. It's no trouble at all. Then how should I address you? Just call me Blake, Mr. Cameron. Hey, Mr. Blake. Sco. Our friends are waiting anxiously. After a simple chat, Jean Tay Cameron felt a little better. This young man was definitely from an ancient noble family. Listen to his standard Verona aristocratic accent. If he had spoken in Italian instead of English, people would have thought that Romeo had really come to life in the real world. Could it be that he was really a descendant of the Montague family? By the way, Mr. Blake, do you know Italian? Yen%, at #yen #it, Qin Guang immediately switched to Italian, which Jean Tay couldn't understand. On the other hand, his assistant, who was also from Italy, was stunned. Oh my God. Philip, what's wrong? Jean Tay Cameron asked doubtfully. Philip exclaimed, Mr. Blake's pronunciation is so pure. It's exactly the same as my classmate from the Verona Rusco family when I was studying in Milan. Jean Tay Cameron was really shocked this time. Could it be that he really picked up a treasure? Did the Montague family really exist? The young master of the Montague family came to act as his ancestor, Romeo? Friend, don't make a fuss. Okay, we're almost there. Let's hurry up. It'll take some time to change. Okay, respectable Mr. Blake. Jean Tay Cameron had completely forgotten something. A few days ago, there seemed to be another mysterious person called Blake who caused quite a stir in Eaton Manor and the North American music industry. However, he had heard that Blake was a blind man, while this young man had a pair of sapphire blue eyes. His gaze was bright and piercing, and he was a noble young master with an imposing appearance. They shouldn't be the same person, right? As the time for the official performance approached, the senior members of the Motion Picture Association, led by President Fred, finally walked out of the castle building they had been holed up in for more than 10 days under the watchful eyes of the public. They lined up and walked towards the gate of the villa's garden. The large iron gate, decorated in medieval European style, slowly opened with an ancient creak. The crowd outside split into two groups at the signal of the security guards. Looking at the 6-meter-wide pure wool carpet that led from the gate of the villa to the gold-rimmed chairs dozens of meters away, Fred only wanted to curse. Faster, thief. Do you have to make it so formal? Are you guys going to fire 2 more salutes? If you can't put on an earth-shattering performance today, all of us will be embarrassed in front of the whole world tomorrow. Just as Fred was thinking about this, loud bangs could be heard from afar. Fred, Malfoy, and the others' faces were ashen. They almost collapsed on the spot. To you banana. There really are salutes. Old James and the others also staggered. Is Jean Tay Cameron crazy? Aren't we playing a little too much? Welcome guests. Welcome to Romeo and Juliet, presented by the Princeton Repertory Theater. First of all, thank you, friends from the Motion Picture Association, for attending the graduation ceremony specially prepared for young actors by our repertory theater. The witty Jean Tay Cameron, as the head of the play and a part-time host today, despicably lowered the standard of today's performance. Following Jean T's speech, the audience went into an uproar. What? Just a graduation ceremony for young actors? Is he joking? He never said that in the previous publicity. That's right. I even heard that Emma Watson will play Juliet. How can it be a weird graduation ceremony for young actors? I even came all the way from Washington for this. Are the people from the Princeton Repertory Theater crazy? Is he joking? The people below the stage began to whisper. YouTube must die, and UBC, who had the live broadcast rights, were also confused. This was different from what everyone had agreed on. As for the other live broadcast platforms and TV stations, they were in big trouble. Although they couldn't film the scene on the stage, they could point the camera at the excited audience, which was more exciting than on the stage. President Fred and the others, who had been sitting anxiously in the front row of the stage, felt a great sense of relief. It seemed that Jean Tay Cameron also knew that the situation was not good. He said this as if he wanted to take the blame alone. What a good buddy. Old James and the others were indignant. What graduation ceremony for young actors? You're insulting the founder of the International Performing Arts. At this moment, a plane from Los Angeles to New Jersey had just landed at Newark Liberty Airport. No one noticed that a fat old man rushed out of the plane in a hurry. He was wearing sunglasses and his steps were very fast. After leaving the airport, he took a taxi and went straight to Eaton Manor. Damn, I should have watched the news earlier. If I had seen it yesterday, I wouldn't have been late today. Missing Qin Guang's performance of Romeo and Juliet will be the biggest regret of my life. I, Donald Zhou Xian, must see that incredible Chinese man perform on the stage with my own eyes.